are having lots of fun. I like playgrounds too, even ones with very big slides. I like the monkey bars and I like the knots and crosses. I like the monkey bars. I like the clock. We are having lots of fun at this playground. Bye! Bye!
I'm Haikal Raji from A1 Bakery. We've been in Brunswick since 1992. We specialise in Lebanese bread and pastries. We've also introduced a range of Lebanese dishes to our menu. And we've also got a wide range of Lebanese groceries. We like Brunswick because it's very much...
Well, good evening, councillors and members of the gallery and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor John Kavanagh and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moreland, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I also pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to elders from other communities who may be here tonight. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland their home, and in doing so have contributed to the positive, rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that the council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just a reminder that in line with the adopted Councillor Code of Principles and outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, to not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, you may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow directions of council staff or security officers. Thank you for your understanding and your cooperation. Councillors in attendance tonight, we have Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor Jess Dorney, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Abood, Councillor Alia Farnley, Councillor Dale Martin, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Lambros Tapanos, and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Officers in attendance, to my immediate left, we have the Chief Executive Officer, Narina De Lorenzo. We have over here Greg Gale, who's the Acting Director of City Infrastructure, Arden Joseph, the Director of Social Development, Kirsten Costa, Director of Planning and Economic Development. On the near side here, James Scott, Director of Corporate Services, Sally Curran, the Unit Manager of Governance, Olivia Wright, the Manager of Property and Governance, and in the corner we have Tina Paris, who's the Acting Executive Director of Organisational Development. I note the leave of absence has been granted to Councillor Carly Hannon from April the 3rd this year to April the 26th. Councillors, are there any other apologies for tonight's meeting? No. Being no apologies, I'll move on to councillors to interests or conflicts of interest. Are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare, councillors? There being none, we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting. Councillors, could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of March 2018? Moved by Councillor Afanley, seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Any discussion?
No.
Any other councillors wish to speak on the item? Being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, against, declare that carried. Petitions. I have no petitions for tonight's agenda. Councillors, are there any petitions from councillors tonight? Being none. Are there any petitions to be tabled from the gallery? There are none. Okay, so there are no petitions to be tabled tonight. So as such, we can move on to question time nice and early. Question time is an opportunity of 30 minutes for citizens of Moreland to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter on any of the council officer reports, this is the time to raise the question with us. Questions can be submitted online prior to the meeting as well. A maximum of 2 questions are allowed per person, and a maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject. Council will then proceed to the next subject, returning to the previous subject if time allows. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and will be responded to between now and the next council meeting. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no formal response. However, council will action any commitments made in answering the question. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure we hear as many questions, and there are many that have been submitted. So I ask that we don't enter a debate during this time given and inform council of the context of the question, but I ask that you get to the question as quickly as possible. Also, councillors, I'll be only accepting an answer to a question from either one councillor or one officer, and we should address each question succinctly. The commencement time is 7:03. All right, so okay, we have Bernard Delacour, is it? Yes, please. Bernard, would you come to the lectern, please, Dan? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Good evening.
Good evening.
Regards the agenda item for the C164.
Yep.
Myself and other residents have received advice from Atma Environmental which raises queries about the Golder report, and our advice is included in our submissions that we've made. Our advice refers to the EAO General Practice Note, which says that the Planning Authority should be careful in applying the EAO and should satisfy itself that these sites are potentially contaminated. My question is, what assurance can Council provide that they will be careful and will satisfy themselves in these regards?
Okay, thank you, Bernard. Thanks for the concise manner. You can say that because I know we're not going to answer, and we'll have another question in a moment. Any councillor like to answer? We'll go to the Director, Kirsten Costa, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The application of the environmental audit overlay is a very comprehensive process, and the Golder report is the expert report we've relied on to make that assessment. It then requires the properties to then undertake very detailed assessments as part of any future development approval. So there will be requirements as part of development applications.
Right, thank you very much, Director. Now, I think you have another question, Bernard. I'm happy to hear from
very
you.
briefly. What is the Council's liability given that these residential properties are potentially contaminated as a result of long-term polluters?
Okay, so it's related to the first question. I'll go back to the Director for that.
Through the Mayor, the liability will be with the landowners. They will be required to meet the requirements of the audit overlay, and that's why they go through very comprehensive assessments, and they do have to clean sites up before that happens and have to satisfy council that they are clean for sensitive uses.
No action against the polluters?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, Bernard?
The question was about against the polluters,
No.
if there's liability against the polluters.
Through polluters, so if the site itself has existing pollution problems
As a result of
previously,
neighbouring.
So I think we're going back to the applicant, isn't it? Is responsible for that?
So yeah, the landowners are responsible for cleaning up the sites. There can be quite complex situations where someone else's site has led to contamination on someone else's, and is that what you're referring to in those circumstances?
Yes.
Yes. So through those processes, invariably they end up as civil matters separately to the process, because you do have to clean up your own site. But if someone else has contaminated, you have to prove that in other forums. And we have had sites like that in Moreland before as well.
Okay.
Thank
you, Bernard. I believe that Sue has similar questions. So, Sue, would you like to come forward, Sue Bitchby? No, zip.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I live at 6 Ann Street, Brunswick,
Yes.
and we have a mechanics from the alleyway from us, Bernard and myself. First of all, I'd like to know if council will query the Golder Review and get a second opinion from a peer review. The Golder report uses words like conservatively and possibly upgradient, suggesting the application of EAO to our properties is very conservative, not because of any known or identified high potential for contamination.
Right.
So I'd like to request, a peer review, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for asking it so succinctly. Director?
Certainly, through the Mayor, there were questions raised about that report, but we went back for certain clarifications to be made, which is now the attached revised report, to make clearer what the requirements are. Any auditor will apply a conservative assessment because of the liabilities that the last question raised. Council doesn't generally peer report its own consultants for its own papers. It will use those experts in a panel hearing if it proceeds to panel hearing, and other people will bring their experts as well, and they'll be cross-examined by panel members and other legal representatives potentially as part of that panel hearing as well.
And Sue, would you like to ask the next question because it is related?
Yeah, I'd like to ask council what other avenues exist to challenge the application of the EAO to our properties.
No. Okay, thank you. And
Through the Mayor, that would occur as part of the panel process. So attending the panel and querying how it's been applied, and the independent chair and experts on that panel will then consider that request.
Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And this related to something. Erica Plontine, is it? Is it Erica in Pitt Street?
No.
Sorry.
Can I read this out on behalf
You
of
may.
Erica? She's
You
not
may.
feeling
Yeah,
terribly
thank you.
well.
And you've been.
So Erica says, I notice you have amended the information sheet for the EAO. Would you amend it further to correct the address? And also, would you amend the recommendation for the EAO as a consequence of there being no continuity between the former dry cleaners and my property, which Eric is at 10 Pitt Street, and the former dry cleaner site now containing dwellings, apartments and buildings?
And you can ask the next part too, I think. We'll ask it. If you ask the next one too, and we'll answer both at the same time.
And she also asks, why not include proper protections in the DDOs for residential properties within the BAC rather than just reasonable amenity impacts and no guidance on setbacks and wall heights, which leaves it open to interpretation?
No worries. Can you thank Erica for the way in which she's written that question, and we'll hear the response from the Director. I'm going to the Director on these because they are quite technical planning matters.
Certainly, through the Mayor. To clarify, the DDOs themselves do have height maximums and setbacks, so there are protections there, and particularly in relation to where the activity centre abuts residential areas outside of the activity centre. Those sensitive interfaces have very specific controls and requirements that are specified in the DDO. Sorry, in terms of the, I just have to read again the first question, sorry, on the EAO. I think we would have to investigate that a lot further. It's a very specific, and I'm not familiar with that particular site and those details. It's something that we would
take that part of the question
take that on notice. Yeah.
Right, so because that part of the question's been taken on notice, that will be answered before the next council meeting in a letter back to the resident. All right, so thank you very much. We move on to Simon Jepskin, and It's regarding mills.
My question is very similar to the last one, which is essentially if you could just go into some detail of the setbacks and height limits for the rezoning of properties adjacent to single and double story dwellings, and I guess further to that, what abilities there are to counteract VCAT applications that may seek to exceed the recommended limits.
Yeah, okay. Yep, thank you very much, Simon. I assume Councillor would happy for the Director to answer? Yep. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, through the Mayor again. If you refer to the attachments to the report, we've got copies of the DDOs there. I refer you to, it's page 6 of 19 of the Schedule 18 of the DDO. That I'm just using that as an example. It's got the heights and the angles that then lead to how the interface from the street needs to be addressed in particular on that one. What else have we got? We've got... There's a lot of controls in the schedules that are there.
I guess I'm just concerned that a lot of residential developments end up going to VCAT, and the 4 stories often could become 8 or whatever. And I'd just like to know what processes or controls you have in place to
We've got that. Happy with that, Simon? Right.
Certainly.
Thank you. So
yes, in terms of those heights, they are discretionary at this stage in terms of how the Minister's handled Council's amendments thus far. He does have on his desk a request for them to become mandatory. In the meantime, though, I understand it is open to interpretation, that discretion, and certainly the way that it's handled is to continue to apply the same angles and requirements for setbacks as they continue to go higher. So that's the main control that we use to try and make sure that if there is additional height, it still provides the setbacks that we would have envisaged if the heights had been higher. And that's at this stage, Council largely refuses anything over and above 1 or 2 stories higher than what Council has envisaged anyway, because it's very difficult to meet those requirements. And we have had some success at VCAT on a number of applications in that regard.
Thank you very much, Director. Peter Hanson, please. Peter.
Thanks for your time. My question relates to the industrial land use strategy and the rezoning. It applies the height controls from the Brunswick Activity Centre structure plan. I guess my question is, why those heights are just being adopted when that structure plan is over 8 years old now, I think, and it's been implemented to a certain extent, and there's no review or mechanism to understand the impact of that. I just want to understand.
No, that's a very fair question. Yep. Director.
Okay. Unfortunately, planning processes do take quite some time, and the Brunswick Structure Plan was only adopted about 3 or 4 years ago through Amendment C134. That policy now sets the framework for the structure plan outline and key objectives. In addition, now Council adopted about 18 months ago the Mills Amendment, which is the policy about how industrial land within the activity centre in this situation is going to be handled. For consistency, both of those policies are talking to each other about what they recommended. And in terms of the heights in particular, Council's had quite a lot of success in getting controls adopted through C134, and the intent was not to open that up for debate again and to just transition mills to be the same. So they were aligned essentially.
Thank you very much, Director. Ubaldo? Yes, Ubaldo. Also a question about C164?
Yes. I'm concerned about the area...
Could you speak up a little bit, please, Dodo?
I'm concerned about the area, noted as Area 68 in the mills.
Yes.
And how that impacts on the remaining properties that are still zoned industrial.
By allowing 4 or more stories?
By allowing residential on 3 sides.
Yes, right.
I just wanted to know how that's likely to affect the industrial use, especially in relation to noise and other industrial processes, because there certainly isn't anything in the planning scheme or the current regulations that afford people in an industrial zone any freedom to make noise where there's residential areas in proximity.
Right. So you're worried about the impact on the industries that are currently operating?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And in particular, I'm in the process of I've actually just started building in October, and I've put the slab down, but I'm not sure whether to proceed or not, whether that's actually a usable industrial property any longer.
Tell me if I'm interpreting your question correctly. You're concerned then that if you have residences so close, then they'll be not happy about having your industrial premise operating in your zone.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Anyone want to answer? Director.
These are definitely some of the challenges we have in an area, particularly like Brunswick, where we do have mixed uses, cheek fojal. In terms of council's assessment of that industrial precinct in particular, it's seen the value of the land for employment purposes as something to be retained and part of the activity centre. The roads either side are seen as providing a buffer for the activities. They're not sitting generally, other than one property, right beside a residential boundary, and it's viewed as continuing those uses, and it's the policy in Mills supports that employment activity, and the primary purpose of the activity centre zone is to encourage employment and support employment as well. The businesses themselves will continue to have the obligation of maintaining a level of amenity for adjoining properties, but that level of amenity is very different as if a residential property was adjoining another residential property. This is one of the things where zones join one another in planning. Amenity expectations are different, and where they adjoin an existing industrial, the test for the level of amenity is not as high as if it was a less heavy use. Okay. So the obligations will still be on both parties, but it's an existing condition and council supporting that existing condition.
All right, thank you very much. Lisa Edgar?
Hello, thank you very much. My question is in relation to C164.
Yes.
Specifically the property at 220 Albion Street in Brunswick, which is currently a bait shop, and it's right next to the railway line at Anstey Station. We live in one of the many properties surrounding that, and all of the properties that actually surround 220 Albion Street in that large block have heritage overlay, are low-scale premises. They're located outside the designated activity centre and would be significantly overshadowed and have a visual bulk if a four-storey development were approved on that site. The proposal is currently for a four-storey development there. Given that sort of can't consideration be given to this property and it be required to have a maximum height of the surrounding properties, that is 2 stories rather than the 4. I wanted to do a Lego construction to show how crazy it would look, but I didn't get to it.
And you're also pointing out being a heritage precinct as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We don't. There's one aspect to that is we don't mind it being rezoned from industrial, commercial to residential. Yeah. It's the height that we're concerned about.
All right, thank you. Okay, Director.
Through the Mayor, the heights themselves at 4-storey reflect the fact that it is activity centre land. One of the key policies that council's put in place is to drive residential growth into activity centres to protect the remaining areas outside them, essentially. So to rezone land at only a 2-storey height in an activity centre is contrary to that policy. So the 4-storey is something which it's adopted in all of its activity centres where it's on the edge. And in terms of the interface with heritage, it doesn't necessarily mean it can actually get to 4 storeys if it then complies with the DDO's setbacks and wall heights. And I can imagine when you talk about Lego, that's exactly what starts to happen to respond to that interface. The outcome on the edges adjoining the heritage will have to respect that heritage height. Without a concept in place, I can't really explain it much more than that, but it does have to respond to it. And the controls very specifically reference how it needs to respect adjoining heritage areas as well as a specific part of the control.
When you look at the plan, though, it does seem to be a bit of an anomalous situation, and yet it doesn't seem to have any additional considerations given to that property. Like when you look at all of the rest of the activity.
I'll get a quick response to that.
Yep. I'm just, in terms of how we've applied the amendment, that activity centre boundary has existed since 2010, and we're applying the policies, again, from Mills and the Brunswick Structure Plan all together so that they're still aligned. We've not proposed to then start changing activity centre boundaries. What you're asking would require that, and that's a lot more extensive, and Council would then have to update other existing adopted policies as well.
All right, Lisa, thank you. Thank you very much, Brendan. Angela from Orient Road.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Following on from Lisa, I am also impacted by the 220 Albion Street 4-storey. My backyard is 6 metres by 4 metres. That's my only outside space, and I'm going to be overlooked by a 4-storey building. Do any of these councillors here have a 4-storey building next to their property overlooking their backyard and their privacy?
Okay, I'll answer that. I don't. I'm happy for other councillors to, if anyone want to wish to answer. No. Anyone else want to answer? No, don't. Anyone else?
3-storey.
Okay.
Can you go outside in your backyard and enjoy the privacy of your backyard?
Through the chair, please, through the chair. Right, thank
Thank
you. I'll just ask any other councillor want to answer that question? No. But thank you, I think you've made your point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Michael Pettit.
Mayor, Councillor, staff, Michael Pettit, I'm a member of the Friends of Edward Street, Pitchford Park. You've probably heard something about that from time to time. I'm here to express the recognition that we live in an activity center area, lots of transport access, lots of new apartment buildings going up to accommodate all the people who are moving in. What we really need is to turn the Edward Street car park into some open space and a park. And in your notes tonight, it's listed as a very high priority area. I'm here to underscore that. It really needs to happen. And my question is, and you may or may not want to answer this, but I hope you'll think about it, maybe drop a note. I'd like to know what you councillors individually think about that spot as a location for open space / park rather than an 8-storey apartment block. Thank you.
Well, I think I can answer generally. Our policy at Park Close to Home recognises that as an area of high need. There's no doubt about that.
And that's a positive note, I take it.
Absolutely.
Shared. Thank you.
Anyone, I'm happy to take any other answer on that at all? Okay. Thank you. Vita, Mr. Tester.
Vita Mezzatesta, 12 Betty Street, Pascoe Vale. I've seen the council agenda, and on page 110, Moreland Council has recommended that the new Pascoe Vale Community Centre be named after Robert Roy McGregor Dawson. He is worthy of such an honour because he bought and gifted an acre of land to the citizens in 1940 to be added to Rogers Memorial Reserve and to improve the surrounds of the Pascoe Vale pool. I have been in touch with the descendants of the McGregor Dawson family who consented and support the naming of the centre after him. Not only did he gift land, he was also responsible for ensuring council purchased hundreds of acres of land when the southwest and northwest areas of the city of Coburg were being subdivided, knowing it would be difficult to do so once areas were settled and established with homes. All this demonstrates his public spirit and foresight on his part, which the man just mentioned, they're having difficulty getting open space in their area. So my question is, here's a question. In the agenda it states McGregor Dawson had gifted land to the city of Coburg. He gifted it to the citizens. Can this be amended, please? And one of the descendants wants to know why council did not know the status of the park that the 1 acre was gifted. Was this due to incompetence?
Okay. And sorry, just again, Vita, it was wrong because it said Coburg rather than Pascoe Vale, or what was it wrong?
Well, it said it was gifted, in the agenda it said it was gifted to the city of Coburg. He gifted it to the citizens.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I suppose that's okay, I can understand where you're coming from there. Yeah, I suppose council always talks about council assets, but you're right, they're citizens' assets, that's correct. You are correct on that. And the second part was?
Why council didn't know the status of the park that 1 acre was gifted. Was this due to incompetence?
Okay.
That was from one of the family members.
Right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, would you like to respond? Yeah.
So just through the Mayor, so just responding to that, there's a whole range of parcels in the city which have come about in lots of different ways. We don't have a recorded history of every piece of land that council might have had or the citizens might have had that council's holding for them. So we don't always have these histories. This is part of the naming process in putting it out there and seeing what people can share with us, because often the richness of these stories come from our citizens as well. So, we don't hold a record of the history of every piece of land in terms of and this was quite some time ago, in terms of how these things came about. So it isn't something that we keep active records on, especially this historical information. It is wonderful when we hear this because it's such rich information. It's just we don't have those sorts of records ourselves.
Okay, well, we hope there's no further building on the reserve in future.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vita. Thanks for the question. John Englert?
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. John Englert from Climate Action Moreland. So my question tonight is on the sports surface needs analysis. I was reading the officer's report and it makes no mention whatsoever of how the urban heat island effect will be impacted by synthetic pitches. Now I know it's a problem area. We do need to increase the usage rates of these pitches, but we've also got a problem with the urban heat island effect. So I'm just raising, there's an issue in that it hasn't occurred in the officer's report, that this consideration is taken into place. And I was also going to ask, are there adaptive measures that can be also taken when we put in a synthetic pitch? I'm not sure if it's possible, but maybe there is. Okay. So I'm just putting it out there as some difficult questions which you'll need to deal with in the future from this report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and Arden, would you like to speak to that? Sure. Director of Social Development.
John, thank you for the question and the element of urban heat. This is a report that is not proposing that we develop any particular site at this point. This is a study to identify some of the opportunities. So there's a fair way to go still in terms of which one, at what point, and what funding has to be sourced for it. The point about urban heat island, so it hasn't been overlooked. It will be taken into account when we start to look at a particular site, when that time arrives. And the other point I wanted to make was that with synthetic surfaces, they keep developing and enhancing almost every year. So there are new techniques, there are new surface types that the industry keeps popping up that I'm sure in time will play a good role in trying to mitigate some of that urban heat island issue as well. Good. We'd hear your comments.
Thank you very much, John. Rod Duncan from...
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Rod Duncan. I've been a participant in the community reference group for the Fleming Park refresh process, both as a local resident and bringing professional experience in plan making for local communities. We thank the Council for initiating the refresh process, responding to community frustration with the 2014 master plan for Fleming Park, which was hampered by poor engagement and a lack of attention to future priorities in this important park in the centre of booming Brunswick. During the preparation of the draft before you tonight, I've attempted to act as a conduit between the diverse informal user communities that use that park, and I've encountered, to my alarm really, a level of cynicism, a loss of trust and some disengagement amongst the community who felt that previous contributions on this and other matters have perhaps been ignored or assurances haven't been kept. I think that the refresh process is a great opportunity to redeem that, but unfortunately I think some of the weaknesses of the earlier plan are being repeated in this through limited engagement and not establishing priorities for the future uses within the park. But I think it's appropriate at this stage that the draft before you tonight gets put out there for public comment, available for public feedback, provided that there's a consultation process includes an assurance that the community that their inputs will be welcome and will be objectively considered in the finalisation of the plan. The officer report doesn't detail how this mechanism might be done, but my question is, would councillors agree that it's important for this final step to include an assurance of transparent and impartial consideration of both the draft and community feedback to it? And I think that with that assurance, the refresh process can redress some of that simmering discontent and bring broad acceptance of the content of the plan, which should be essential for the durable plan for over $11 million in 20 years.
Thank you very much, Rod, for your question. And Councillor Riley.
Thank you. On my understanding with the refresh is that I think we have undertaken quite transparent processes to date. I believe you have some concerns that I've been emailing you, Rod, about that. I think that the process so far has been important, it's been lengthy, and it's been costly to us to do this. And I believe tonight's report is actually going to go out to the community, and like all of our processes, I would hope that it's going to be transparent and open. And I think the insinuation that it's not is actually quite concerning me, and I'll be meeting with you tomorrow morning to talk about this, but I have great concern about that kind of implication that we're not actually doing the best that we can as a community for our community when we make these big decisions.
All right. Okay.
Can we ask that gentleman out there not to make rude signs at me while I'm speaking, please?
Is there a... Right.
Actually, I'm going to sit until...
That's right. Okay. Just a reminder on the behaviour in the gallery, please. I'm sorry, I didn't see that, Councillor Riley. Thank you very much, Rod. Thank you for your question. And now, councillors, could I have a motion to extend question time? There's another 8 that have submitted questions to hear those 8 questions. Moved by Councillor Bolton.
Second.
And seconded by Councillor Farnley. Okay. So we're extending, the motion is to extend question time to hear the 8 questions that have been submitted. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Next question we have is from Kay Oddie.
I'll be quick. I'm Kay Oddie and I'm Secretary of the Friends of Merri-bek Creek, and I'd just like to bring the support of the Friends of Merri-bek Creek and the wider community. Many of you would know about the proposed sale of the Outlook Drive land in Glenroy. And my question is to ask that the council does take that support from the community on board when and if they decide to proceed with acquiring the land, that support is there for retaining it as public open space, and hopefully for a price that's appropriate for that retention for the future and for the Moreland Council.
No, and thank you very much for your question, Kay. I assure you, every councillor is aware of how important that is to the community, and the 3 councillors who attended the forum, the meeting that you organised, saw the passion in the people that were at that meeting, and I assure you that's been passed on. And as you know, we have a confidential report tonight, but those who have made a submission will hear from me in the next couple of days to let you know at least some generalities of the outcome of tonight's decision. Thank you so much. And Andrew Gemmell.
I'm Andrew Gemmell from 23A Gladstone Parade, Glenroy, and I'll just follow up on the last submission. Well, the question is, are councillors aware of how much the community values the land at 1 to 33 Outlook Drive? The only reason this room's not overflowing at the moment is that we are aware and understand the reasons for this item being confidential. But I assure you the people of Glenroy and Gowan Brae and surrounds are outraged that this is in danger of being taken away.
Would you like to answer, Councillor from North West Ward?
I'll just briefly respond. Myself, Councillor Martin and Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Yildiz was an apology for the meeting that was held, and we definitely felt the concern and the fear and also the outrage at the potential sale of this land, and that's been taken on board and considered, and the submissions that have been received have been read and understood, and we've got that report coming tonight. So I assure you that it's very well within our focus and our attention tonight, the severity of this piece of land and the consequences that can flow from it. So we've taken it all on board, and I want you to know that we've heard and we're considering it very seriously.
And the second question is that the last submission talked about purchasing the land. I reckon you should make every effort to just get the land from Moreland City Council, not purchase it, get it from the state government. The state government are initiating the sale. I think you should try and get it for the citizens of Moreland.
Yeah.
I live in a street with 59 blocks. We moved there in 2007. It's got 59 blocks. There are 9 blocks left with their individual houses. Every other block has had the backyard taken up. Open space is they're trying to take it away.
Thanks very much. We'll take that as a comment, and thank you very much, Andrew, and thanks for your passion and your interest throughout the process. Nick Dolby. You have 2 questions, I think, Nick. So.
Yes, I do have 2 questions. I'll try and remember all the points I want to raise in those 2 questions. Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. I won't be asking a question about the Edgar's Creek Bridge, except, good on you, keep it up, fantastic. First question, local laws. 1 comment, 3-hour meetings, fantastic. We've been here, you've been here, I've been here at after midnight, and are good decisions made after midnight? No. 3-hour meetings, I fully support that. But question time. I know Moreland is unique, not unique, but in fact nearly unique in allowing public question time, and it's one of the strong democratic forces within this council. It allows individuals to get up and ask councillors and officers questions. The proposal to limit it to 1 minute, I think, is too severe. I would strongly argue for a 3-minute retention on things. Is there support in the council, amongst the councillors, for that?
Well, I think I'll answer that by saying tonight is going out to consultation. It's certainly not the final decision tonight. I'm sure you'll be submitted to that, and I thank you and I do also thank you for hanging in there till midnight at some of these meetings. I congratulate you on that. But it's going up for consultation, and I'm sure what you've said tonight will feed into that, but also all formal submissions will too, Nick. So I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for making that point. And I might get you to do the next question.
Second question is the level crossing authority is removal authority is planning to remove 2 level crossings in Moreland. There is strong community support for a sky rail from Park Street all the way up to Gaffney Street, perhaps beyond. Is there support amongst councillors for such a thing?
Does any councillor like to take that subject at the moment? Okay, I'll go to the director. I go to Thanks, Nick. Kirsten Coster, I think. Yeah. No, I didn't say that one.
Right, so through the Mayor, I understand the question is there support amongst councillors for Skyrail? Is that right?
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Sorry.
I'll answer it then. I think at this point, you have an answer, Councillor Tabernos?
My views are well known and they're on record. At this point, we do want to see a whole line solution. So there is the option of going up or going down, and we are looking at both of those, but we're also keen to hear what the community thinks about both those options. There's certainly pros and cons to both approaches taken. The most important thing for me, and I think for the Moreland community, is that we get a commitment for the whole line, because we have a high concentration of level crossings, and we certainly want to make sure that we remove all of those. Now, there are advantages in regards to having it go up, and that is the open space advantage. We will double the open space in the city almost overnight, and that would alleviate some of the pressure on the bike path as well. So all of those pros and cons would hopefully be debated, and we look forward to the community's view as well in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Tabernos. I've got Antonia Perrick.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Two questions. Paragraph 3, this is about the local laws.
Yep.
Minutes. Paragraph 3 of the executive summary states that there has been benchmarking with other councils, meeting procedures to identify good practice. Just curious which councils were reviewed and benchmarked against. There's no mention at all in the body of the report.
Yep.
That's my first question.
Yep, fine. I might get you to ask the second, and we'll ask both, answer both.
The second one's slightly different. How are you ensuring decisions made by the councillors at council meetings are resulting in changes to relevant council procedures, policies and strategies?
Right, so
and
what comes from here, what moves
to
from here into the organisation and gets done, basically, is what, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. All right, okay. I think we'll go for the Director, I think. James Scott, Director of Corporate Services.
Through the Mayor, just in response to that first question, we benchmarked with neighbouring councils, so that included Banyule, Brimbank, Darebin, and a number of other councils through Melbourne.
And the second one, I think the CEO is happy to answer, or would you like to answer it?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah.
I heard it. I can answer it.
Okay.
So just through the Mayor, so your question is about how council resolutions are enacted or how council assures itself that it results in the things that council has resolved to do. So we have a register of resolutions that don't get closed off unless they've been actioned. That's produced, it's a report that's given to councillors so that they can see the progress. As far as whether councillors view a specific internal procedure, those are all within the purview of the organisation. Council provides resolutions and says, you organisation, we're directing you to go ahead and do this thing. And then the method by which it's done is then in the purview of the CEO and the organisation. So that's how the way we are accountable for what we've done is basically through the resolutions report to say, yes, this has been enacted. But then as in terms of its reach into the organisation, that's where the limit of the reach is. So I think you're asking about specific procedures being changed internally.
Oh.
So I think that's what I just wanted to...
Coming from a policy and strategy, some have been passed, not implemented, fallen to the wayside for years. Strategies have been superseded, or large elements of, say, the Laneways strategy, the one published online currently, still states Bluestone will be ripped up and replaced with concrete in non-heritage overlay areas. So that's...
In the current web, if you've got some specific examples, then I'm happy for you to email them to me, so that's fine. Yeah. So happy to check that. You know, your question was how do we keep track of whether we're implementing these things? That's the method by which it's done.
Okay. Thank you, Antonia. Marilyn Blizzard.
I'm asking this question on behalf of the Coburg Historical Society Committee, of which I am the current Vice President, and the Society's been going for 46 years, and it's a very active community organisation. It will be 4 weeks tomorrow since I emailed the Mayor, Councillor Kavanagh, with a copy to the CEO to ask when the Sydney Road Shopping Centre heritage photographic panel would be reinstated. I have also contacted the Coburg Place manager and talked with the director, or emailed with the Director of Infrastructure on this matter. The responses have been a query number, a bit of information saying it was being forwarded to the business unit, an email asking for clarification of the location and design of the photographic panel, and assurances that measures would be taken to locate it. The photographic panels
and a telephone conversation between the two of us.
Yes, definitely with the Mayor. The photographic panel stated clearly it was provided by the Coburg Historical Society, and it had stood in the eastern Sydney Road footpath, approximately outside Dunn's building at 436 to 442 Sydney Road, near the curb for over 26 years. It was clearly identified on the back as a heritage panel. It was apparently removed during the Coburg Shopping Centre streetscape works last year, involving new street furniture, footpath paving and curbing, and was last seen in a high cyclone fence compound near the Coburg Leisure Centre at Christmas time. The photographic panel was paid for by a state government grant, which was successfully applied for by the Coburg Historical Society for that purpose. The council involvement was the installation of the panel in the footpath and the unveiling of a panel by Coburg Mayor then Norma Willoughby in October 1991. Renowned local historian and Coburg Historical Society member Laurie Birchall wrote the successful funding application, researched the panel's contents, designed it, and then organised for its manufacture. So my question is, can you please tell me what has happened to our missing heritage photographic panel? Part 2 is, in the last weeks, what have you done and what have you found out about its fate?
Yep. Good. Well, we do have an answer for you. Just to get the facts exactly right, I'll go to Greg, but the acting manager. But I am aware that the panel has been found. Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Through the Mayor. Marilyn, thank you for your question. And as you stated, you have been in correspondence with Grant Thorne over recent weeks. And you might not have had an opportunity, but I have sent you an email this afternoon to advise that we have actually located the sign. There's a bit of confusion as to what the sign might have looked like and so forth, given the location that was stated. But I have to say that the sign has been found and we'll be installing it in its previous location in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
Can I just request that, Greg, that you liaise with Marilyn to make sure we put it back in exactly the spot that they're comfortable with?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. Tim Reid.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Tim Reid. Look, I wanted to repeat a question I asked in February, which was only incompletely answered, very well answered by Councillor Tapanos, but I also asked whether Council has any information or Council officers have any information that they can share with residents about the impact of removing parking from shopping districts, both the impact on traders and businesses and also the impact on the traffic mode used by people to get to those businesses. Okay. And I'm concerned about this because I'm concerned about safety of cycling on Sydney Road now that the upfield bike path is at capacity and blocked.
Thank you so much, Tim. Do I have a councillor or an officer that would... Would it be you, Greg, or not? Yep, you have an answer? Thanks.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. I understand you raised a similar question back in February. Given the details, I will have to take the question on notice and get back to you.
Well, we have Tim's address here, so...
Yes, I do.
All right. Thank you, Tim, and thank you very much for the manner in which you asked the question. And we have two more councillors. We've got Joan Grounds.
Thank you for hearing me.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to know why there are no more rubbish bins, why there are no rubbish bins on pedestrian roads near Sydney Road in my case, but also people are complaining about the entertainment areas off Lygon Street.
And you're specifically concerned about Dodge Street too, is that correct, or not?
Well, Dodge Street. The
Yes.
streets are filthy, absolutely filthy. And if you go to Western Street after a weekend, people have used trolleys to put stuff in because there are no bins. And secondly, I'd like to ask the council to clean the glass off the footpaths. My dog has had 9 pieces of glass in one toe and 30 in another. And I'm meeting people whose children have fallen, who have glass, so that's my question.
No, well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to learn of that.
Can we get a clarification on the road where the glass is, so we can follow on?
I think you should come,
Yeah, that's right.
come take a walk off Sydney Road.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you how long it takes to eat a McDonald's on Edward
I've got your
Street.
phone number here. I'd like to have a walk around with you if that's all right.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Thank
okay,
you.
I'll definitely contact you for that.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Can I just ask, were the bins actually removed, or were there bins, the streets you're familiar with, were there bins previously which were removed, or there've never been bins there?
I've not been here that long, so I don't think they've ever been there. And it's going down the gutters as well, so it's an environmental issue.
Okay.
It's
So I
filthy.
think glass would be multiple streets, because it's a...
Look, a couple of councillors have suggested they'd like to come too. Look, I'll contact you, we'll set up a time and we'll come with the director and we'll walk around and we'll look at exactly, and if you can pinpoint then where you think bins should go, we can have a good discussion at that point. I can assure you of that.
I'm going away for 2 months.
I
at
know,
the end of-
when do you go, can I ask?
Excuse me?
When do you leave?
I leave probably next Monday.
Next Monday, okay?
But
Would Friday suit you?
no, the removal is.
That's right. Sorry.
I'm
I'll
sorry.
tell you what. Look, thank you for being
But
so.
Monday, I could do it on Monday, and Monday's a good day because
Okay, we'll do it
after the
Monday.
weekend, it's very,
Okay, I'll
very
change things
noticeable.
around because I think it's important that we get it done straight away.
Oh, good.
All right,
Thank you
okay,
very
so
much.
I'll be in contact with you tomorrow and we'll arrange a time on Monday and then I'll let
Excellent.
councillors know.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Yes?
I just wanted to add to part of what might be the answer to the question regarding what's going on, which isn't exactly the question you put, but I've been trading on Lygon Street for about the last 12 years, and the street and the neighbourhood has changed significantly. So where there probably wasn't a requirement for public rubbish bins like there was up in Sydney Road or further around the shopping precincts, potentially what we need to do is revisit that in fact now, not only is there more of a drinking culture and people might be throwing bottles on the road because there's more nightlife, but also there are more people walking around all the time than there were even just 15 years ago when there were many more factories. So it just could be something that simple that we need to address how much things have changed, and I'm sure that visiting the neighbourhood might show that bins might be required.
Thank you so much. And I think Catherine's got a similar question. Are you happy, Catherine, if we tee up to meet? Would you like to ask? Yep, sorry. Good evening, Catherine. I see you from the same address or
Yes, we
apartment
are
block.
actually.
So,
Just a bit of a twofold question.
Yes.
I'm concerned, I've moved here from Brooklyn in New York, which was the home of graffiti,
Yeah.
but I'm finding Brunswick is overtaking anything that New York is looking like at the
get that.
moment.
I get that,
Every
yeah.
street is affected by graffiti, and
Yeah.
I just wondered, are we working with the police, the CTV, what's happening?
Yeah.
And also the condition. The streets are just filthy, there are weeds mile high, and what's going on? Yeah.
Right. Understand that. All right. Look, I won't call for a direct response, but look, we'll have the chat. We'll have the chat.
Okay, so you can contact me, and I'd like you to have a walk around
I will.
and just look at the streets.
Yep, I will. I can
Okay.
promise we're going to do that Monday. All right, and hopefully you're available. If not, we'll have I'll certainly be in contact directly. Thank you so much. All right, councillors, that concludes question time. We now move to on-notice items from the previous meeting. We had one on... could I have a motion to receive the on-notice items report from the council meetings held on the 14th of February and the 14th of March 2018? Could I have a mover to receive those? Moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? I'll put those to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We've got reports by mayor and councillors. I know we normally put it on the end, but I think we'll just go around the table and see if we can move that on. We'll start with Councillor Yildiz. Do you have anything to report? The mayor and councillors' report. Just to explain, mayor and council reports are reports of the activities of councillors in relation to events, activities, meetings or functions that councillors have attended between council meetings. All reports by mayor and councillors will appear in the minutes of this meeting. I'd now like to ask councillors in turn if they'd like to provide a report. No, fine. Very happy to.
I'll pass.
Pass. Yep. Pass.
Okay.
No.
Just want to fly this in the air. So, National Disability Insurance Scheme is having Moreland Disability Expo. I'm on the Disability Working Group, and this was handed to me today to promote. And so Friday the 11th of May, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It goes all day and everybody's welcome. So I encourage anybody to come along and have a look at what's going on with this. It's probably advertised on our website as well. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to Councillor Martin for a second.
Just one really brief plug. Sunday the 29th of April is Glenroy Festival. I really do encourage all the residents of Glenroy and that Northwest Ward, which I represent, to come down to the British Shortail Reserve. It's supposed to be a great day, plenty of activities. Bring the family. See you there. Thanks.
Yep. Councillor Dillon?
No problem.
Yeah. And just on the Glenroy on Friday afternoon, the traders have organised a fun afternoon, the first time that the Glenroy traders have attempted to do so. Activities ranging from 3 o'clock onwards. At 6 o'clock they're hosting a movie, and so this is this Friday, Friday the 13th. So if anyone in Glenroy would like to attend, it sounds like a really good thing to go to, and really pleased to see the traders becoming active. All right, okay, thank you. We'll move on to presentation of council reports. Did you want to say something, Councillor?
Midnight on Alvey Street,
No, sorry. Go on, Councillor Hughes. No, you're right. Okay. All right, move on to the first report we need to consider this evening, councillors, is the governance report. That's DCS 1218, governance report, April 2018. Do I have a mover for that report? Moved by Councillor Yildiz, seconded by Councillor Abood. Would you like to speak to it? Any discussion from any other councillors on that report? Being no discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, we have DCS 1318, Review of Meeting Procedure Local Law 2018. Councillor Abood.
Yes, I'd like to put the officer recommendation. We need to fill in a few names there at point 3.
Oh, yes. I'm happy to chair that meeting if that's acceptable. And I'm
happy to be on.
Councillor Riley?
I'd
like
to
have
the submissions.
Councillor Bolton?
Yep. All right. Sorry, can I just get a seconder first? Sorry, Councillor Riley to second. And as far as the names go, I'd like to chair that if possible. Yep. And Councillor Bolton, you suggested you'd like to be on it? Yeah. And Councillor Riley? Any other councillor like to put their name in? Councillor Tapanos? Okay, I think we've had three. I think we had those places there. So those councillors all excellent. Okay, so everyone's clear on what we're voting on. Okay, all right. We'll put that to the vote.
Can I just...
do you want to speak to it? Sorry, no. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, sorry. Speak to it. Move on.
Okay. I'm putting the officer recommendation, even though there are parts of this local law and community impact statement that potentially need to be altered slightly, but I think that the fact that it's going out to a draft is what will allow that to happen. And so I think that it would be unnecessary and complicated to start changing it now. So I'm just happy to have this document in this format go out for consultation, and that's why I'm putting this recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Riley is the seconder. Would you like to speak to it? Okay. Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I've got an amendment. Would either be dealt with in full or point by point. So at the end of point 1, to add the words with the following changes. A, that the current clause 35 for the meeting procedure local law regarding general business items be retained. B, that the new clause 26 be retitled the order of business for ordinary council meetings. C, that the new clause 35(8) relating to public question time be amended to delete the last sentence. That the new clause 35, D, that the new clause 35(13) relating to public question time be amended to allow for members of the community to get a time limit of 3 minutes in which to outline the question and the contextual information leading to them asking the question. And E, that the new clause 62(8)(c) be amended to read that the motion be laid on the table until insert time to allow for the purpose of laying on the table.
Okay. Are any or all of those amendments acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
No.
No? No? Okay. All right. So would you like to put, do we have a seconder? So if we put, you want to put those amendments, say, on block to start off with and see how we go? Or
Unless
not? Yeah, right. If we have a seconder to any or all of those amendments? Okay. They lapse for want of a seconder at this point? All right. Okay. So we'll have, would you like to speak to the, against the substantive motion? Yeah.
I feel that this meeting procedure local law is something which a lot of residents will assume is not relevant to them because it's about how the council meetings are run. But how the council meetings are run does have a big impact on residents. In particular, the proposal to abolish general business items. Now, councillors have to submit notices of motion 10 days in advance currently. That will change under this new proposal to 10 working days in advance. Now, sometimes there can be urgent situations that might come up in the community that residents contact councillors about because they need earlier action. Maybe those, it's very restrictive to move urgent business items. It's a very, very restricted, very exceptional circumstances. Deleting the general business section will delay council in taking action on certain issues. In addition to that, I'm totally opposed to the idea of cutting question time down to 1 minute for members of the public because it's obviously designed so that people are only able to say what their question is but not explain the context in which they're asking their question. So I just believe these measures will reduce community input into council decisions and reduce the voice of the community. So that's why I've sort of attempted to move these amendments. I think there are probably some other changes which aren't so positive as well, but those are probably the two key ones.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any speakers in favour?
Yes.
In favour, yeah.
Look, I'm a bit surprised that Councillor Bolton would want to speak against this because it's about going out to community consultation for feedback. So that's what this is all about. So we're reviewing the meeting procedure local laws. This is the meetings that we have here, how these meetings are conducted. And I think the questioner from the gallery earlier tonight really summed it up. You don't make good decisions at 12 a.m. at midnight on things that affect our local residents. So it's about trying to make sure this meeting is done as efficiently and as productively as possible. In relation to things around concerns around democratic rights for residents to raise concerns and issues, question time will still be there. The vast majority of the questions tonight, I've actually timed them, were well under a minute. And the Mayor, when he was unsure or needed some further context, then allowed that questioner to go into it. So certainly that is what would happen in the future as well. In regards to general business items, you'll note if you've actually looked at the council agenda tonight, you won't see any detail about general business items. That's really poor governance. If a councillor wishes to raise an issue, there's a process to do that. It's through a notice of motion, and then you get council officers to actually provide some feedback on it, financial implications, what it means for residents, is it compliant with policy, etc., etc. And it's quite transparent and in the agenda. But general business items like are just sort of a ghost items that you won't actually see in the agenda. There's no detail. There's no council officer comments on that. So it's really poor governance. It's about cleaning that up. So there's a section for council officers to provide reports. There's a section for councillors to raise issues. That's in the notice of motion. It's all about cleaning it up. So for me, I think when we go out to consultation from the community, I think it'll be fairly well received. And but we will take on that feedback as well, because there will be a committee to hear the submissions, and at that point, if there are big concerns, then we'll be able to take that into consideration before we adopt the final meeting procedure local law.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other speakers against the motion? I'll allow some other speakers for, if you wish to, because it's quite a large item.
Yeah, just to concur with Councillor Farnley's comments, I think the proposals that have been put in the amendment can be taken up in the consultation, and I'm sure many other people have things to say about that. Regarding the question timing, I know that's a matter of discussion amongst councillors continuing to be, and I'm sure it will be during the consultation, and it is important to get that right. I must say quite a number of questions I thought tonight were actually questions that should be emailed and put to us and put to officers before you get to a council meeting. I'm actually surprised that some of these things aren't actually being dealt with on a daily basis. That doesn't mean to say you can't ask them here, but you probably get much better response by dealing with council on a daily basis, because some of them are fairly specific and pertinent to you. So I encourage you to use those facilities, because that's a good way to use that and use question time for sort of bigger questions, I think, in relation to bigger policies and other decisions that we're actually taking. So it's just a good way of using people's time. And I would think that we can actually take those things on in the submissions that are coming to us. So the other item about general business has been one of the discussion amongst us about how to deal with that. We can still have general business items coming up in urgent matters, so they won't be completely off the table, but we are trying to make it more transparent. And I just want to reiterate with Councillor Farnley's comments that often a general business item will be tabled at midday today. You folks won't know what those items are. Often, if we're busy and working and so on, we won't know what they are until the last minute. It isn't a great practice, and we just think that it's better to have things coming up with some notice so that you can be participating in those general business items and making more transparent. So it is one of those contested areas. It's like, should we do it or shouldn't we? But I believe we can get around it through the nominations process, notice of motions process, and through having urgent items still there if you can argue the urgency case. So I look forward to more submissions from you folks and the community about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Riley. If there's no further debate, I might ask the mover if she'd like to close the debate.
Yep, thank you. I think after almost 2 hours of question time, which is a regular thing, it's unfair to assume that the residents of this city don't know what we're up to here, because I think that's underestimating you, and a lot of you do know exactly what we're up to here and hold us to account, which I think is quite good. With regard to question time, I think that for me personally, there was one question that I didn't know was coming, and that was the question which was related to the glass and the lack of rubbish bins down the street. Last question time, or maybe the one before, there was one question that I didn't expect, which was about a darkly lit back lane. So I think that although I really do like the practice of having those questions asked in the chamber, generally we do know what to expect from the questions, and that while I agree that 1 minute can be debated upon, I don't think that that is something we need to resolve tonight as part of this motion. There are many areas of the meeting procedure local law that I think probably will and can be slightly changed, but I just don't think it should be happening right now. It's worth everybody knowing that we've had several facilitated sessions about this particular piece of work, and we're not done yet, and we've had lots of conversations in the House about it, and now we're asking for your opinion. And I know that you would expect to be asked, and you've been asked about many other things, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what the feedback is. I'm also a little bit concerned that when we updated the local laws, things went pretty haywire, and I think it was completely unnecessary. And I'm a bit concerned that that happens again, because I just don't think that it was warranted, and I don't think it made updating that document a positive experience for anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. As the mover, that closes the debate. So, councillors, I'll put the motion that was moved by Councillor Abood and seconded by Councillor Riley to the vote. All those in favour and against, I declare that carried. All right, the next report we have to consider is DCS 1418 Financial Management Report for the period ending 28th of February 2018. Do I have a mover? Councillor Riley? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Abood? Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley?
Just briefly, really the report shows that we're in fairly good position financially, and it outlines why some of that's there. I don't really wish to take up the meeting time to do that, but I encourage people to have a read and to ask any questions about that. With the budget coming up, having some insight into the financials is pretty important, so we're encouraging people to make submissions into that. But it's quite encouraging to be on a council that I think manages its finances as well as we do, and we're in a fairly strong position given the rate capping scenario we're living in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Booth?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend the work that's gone into this report. Sometimes these are perceived as officer reports, but they're actually councillor reports that are prepared for us. And during a briefing that was had a couple of days ago, I was able to ask some questions about this report because finance is the financial management stuff is the bit that I know about the least, and so I think that it's really important that this document is so well prepared, and I was able to get the answers to the questions that I asked, and so I'm very happy to be able to endorse this document.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We have DCS 1518, naming of a new community centres in Rogers Reserve, Pascoe Vale, and I'd like to move an alternative recommendation from the Chair, and because it's an alternative recommendation, I'm going to read it in full, and then I'll ask for a seconder. That Council, 1, names the new facility at 7 Prospect Street, Pascoe Vale, the Pascoe Vale Community Centre, and notes the name will be registered with the Office of Geographic Names. 2, at the time of the opening of the Pascoe Vale Community Centre, that a further plaque be unveiled acknowledging the generosity of Robert Roy McGregor Dawson in gifting land to the people of Pascoe Vale within Rogers Reserve in 1940. 3, in the event of the Officer of Geographic Names rejecting the name of Pascoe Vale Community Centre, then Council's second preference is for the centre to be named McGregor Dawson Community Centre. 4, in the event that the centre is named Pascoe Vale Community Centre, Council endorses the names of both McGregor Dawson and John Murray for other naming projects. 5, in the event that the centre is named McGregor Dawson Community Centre, then Council endorses John Murray for other naming projects. And 6, the Council writes to all submitters, thanking them for their submission and informing them of Council's decision. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. Moved by Councillor Kavanagh, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Councillors, I acknowledge that it's unusual for me to move an item from the Chair, but due to my long-term involvement and my advocacy for this site, I do so this evening. Firstly, I want to say how grateful I am to all submitters. I'm an amateur studier of history myself, including local history, and I learnt a great deal from the submissions, and we owe the people who made the submissions and the people who featured in the submissions a debt of gratitude. My alternative motion should not be seen as taking away from those people nominated, but rather paying tribute to them by ensuring that this marvellous community centre is utilised to its highest level. And in fact, I contacted the extended family members by email today to let them know that I'd be moving an alternative motion. The Pascoe Vale Community Centre has been its working title since plans were first drawn up in selecting the site. This is what has been informally referred to by everyone, and one of the arguments I used for supporting the selection of this site, and councillors who were not on council at the time, I can assure you that it was not universally accepted choice, was to activate the Pascoe Vale Pool site and the Pascoe Vale Pool precinct. For me, this wonderful place was being enjoyed by too few people. I wanted the most utilisation possible, and I believe that naming the facility the Pascoe Vale Community Centre will do this and do it immediately. We are bringing other services from located in different locations to the new site. Services that were located at Coal Reserve, services that were located at Turner Street, and of course Sussex Street. And I truly believe that the easiest way for this transition to take place is by using the name that is already widely used, the Pascoe Vale Community Centre. I ask you to envisage someone who's enrolling in learning English at the neighbourhood house. If the officer recommendation was endorsed this evening, they would be attending the Sussex Neighbourhood House in McGregor Dawson Community Centre located in Rogers Reserve. In saying that, I acknowledge the contribution of Robert Roy McGregor Dawson and his family that was mentioned in the submission and things that I was unaware. And I believe a plaque should be placed there, recognising this act from a truly remarkable family. And in the unlikely event that Pascoe Vale Community Centre is rejected by the Office of Geographic Names, then Council's second preference is for the centre to be named McGregor Dawson. The motion also calls for both McGregor Dawson and John Murray to be added to our list of endorsed names, as they should. Councillors, our draft aquatic strategy protects Pascoe Vale Pool. Our foresight in building this community centre means that more and more people will be passing through this beautiful place and seeing Pascoe Vale Pool, and they can all be proud. The official opening of this grand place will take place soon, and I'll look back with pride and tell you of one of the proudest days on council. And I better stop there because it's 3 minutes, so I better hold myself to account. All right. So, okay. So that's from me. Did second I'd like to speak at all?
I'd like to thank the Mayor for this very well considered motion to Council. I think it combines all the elements that we're trying to encapsulate in this centre. And firstly, I'll address the plaque. I think that's very respectful to our past, to the people that have contributed to our community, and it also, through the motion in itself, looks to our future by allowing people to access this particular facility with ease. It is a hub, it's drawing people from all over the community to Pascoe Vale. That's where it's located. It's going to be well recognised, and I think that's important that we're able to have something that draws on our past, recognises where we've come from, but allows people who may not have that understanding of our past to find this place with ease. Again, it's a hub, it combines many services in there, and it's important that people are able to identify it quite easily and quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Are there any speakers against the motion? Yes, Councillor O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for the opportunity. Look, I'm quite comfortable with the Council Officer's original recommendation, which was to name the centre the McGregor Dawson Community Centre, and I think I've learnt a lot through the process about his contribution. He's donated an acre of land on the adjoining property. I think that's quite a significant contribution to the City of Moreland and its citizens, or City of Coburg or Pascoe Vale, whatever it was at the time, but to the citizens, as pointed out during question time. So I'm quite comfortable to back the Council Officer's recommendation, and so I foreshadow the Council Officer's recommendation if this was not to get up.
Thank you so much, Councillor Farnley. Any speakers in favour? Thank you, Councillor Boone.
I just wondered if I can add, I wanted to add an amendment which is an additional point.
Yes.
So that would read, it would be a point 7 on this particular motion. Ask that officers investigate and create a list of women's names aimed at encouraging people to consider women for the purpose of future naming opportunities.
That's acceptable to me as the mover. Is it acceptable to the seconder?
Most definitely, yep.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak to either the substantive motion, or it's part of the substantive motion now, so did you want to speak to any, or including that point?
Well, I do want to just speak to the point 7.
Okay, fine.
Because I think enough has been said about the rest, but I was really disappointed to see no women's names put forward. There were some Indigenous options, which was highlighted to me by Councillor Tapanos, but no women's names. And I think that as we have got to the point where we are winning awards for women's involvement in sport and this sort of thing, that we start really seriously considering naming some of these new places that need names after women. We've got some sporting heroes and a few other female heroes that, Adela Pankhurst, that there's quite a lot of notable women who've been involved in the city's history, and I think it'll be a great day when one of these places is named after a woman.
Thank you. Is there any further debate either for or against? Yes.
I was initially planning to support the recommendation for the centre to be named McGregor Dawson Community Centre, but I'm actually convinced by the arguments that have been put forward by the mover and the seconder to reflect the contribution of Robert Roy McGregor Dawson, but to go for the first option of it being a Pascoe Vale Community Centre with that recognition. However, if that doesn't get up, I am quite comfortable with it being called McGregor Dawson, because I think, if you look at other major locations which have had their names changed, for instance, from Spencer Street Station to Southern Cross Station, I mean, hardly anyone now remembers it used to be called Spencer Street Station. So, I mean, people do, and there's sports stadiums that change with every new sponsor, commercial sponsor, and people have to get used to the new name. I think people are used to names being a bit of a moving feast. But anyway, I think because of the various services and so forth, I think, I don't care great, I'm not really die and ditch over it, but I slightly prefer the current motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tapanos.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favour of the proposed motion. And in doing so, the point I really want to say is that we should look for other opportunities within the centre as well. So there might be meeting rooms or certain parts of the centre that could encompass McGregor Dawson or what was the other one? Or John Murray as well. Yeah. So I don't think that it's limited. And if we are in a position to actually see what within the centre and the whole region actually could be named after them, that would be a good way to go forward. I do think we do need to acknowledge their contribution to the city, and particularly their donation is quite substantial. So I too had no idea of this history, and so it was a very informative process for me as well. So I do want to see them acknowledged, but I do think the Pascoe Vale Community Centre is what the centre itself should be named. I do question why we probably need all these if-dot points. Perhaps we could have come down and made those determinations later. I think from a strategy perspective, it would probably be better to have said that this is what we want it named and leave it at that, and dealt with the others if the name was rejected. But look, I'm going to support the resolution, and I hope that it does get up, and I hope that we do find many other things that we could name after them.
Are there any other speakers? As a mover, I will close the debate because I did have a speaker against. So I'll just make the point about the dot points. It's just that the centre is already up and running, and I didn't want to delay the process anymore in the unlikely event that the Officer of Geographical Names rejected Pascoe Vale. I just thought we didn't want it to come back to another council meeting and then start the process again. That was the reason for what seems like a convoluted motion. And it also wanted to make sure that we didn't, in the event that it did change its name, that we still honoured John Murray as well. All right, that was the reason for that. All right, and thank you for the debate, councillors. I don't think there's any further debate, therefore I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour and all those against. Okay, declare that carried. Thank you. All right, we move on to the next item tonight, which is DCS 1618, consultation on disposal of Vic Road's land at 117 Leonard Street and 154 to 156 McBride Street, Portner, through the first right of refusal process. Councillor Abood is on effect.
I'd like to put the officer recommendation with one very small amendment, that at point 1C, after Friends of the Moonee Ponds Creek, comma, and the Faulkner Residents Association.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Abood. Do And seconded by Councillor Bolton. And would you like to speak to it all, Councillor Boot?
Might reserve the right.
Okay. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bolton?
Just briefly, I'm pleased that now since December, we've started to adopt this process of a public consultation when various government authorities are planning to flog off open space along our creeks. There's land which has been regarded as by the local community as public open space for many years. Councils invested in mowing it and maintaining it, and then suddenly residents suddenly get hit with land being sold. I mean, I think the motion that was moved in December that led to these public consultations in the event of land being sold is partly because the land along the creeks is very precious, and once it's sold off, it's very, very hard to get back. So I think Moreland really needs to keep going with an approach which really prioritises the land along the creek. We've got 2 campaigns to save land along Merri Creek and Moonee Creek from being sold off, to have that land remain as public open space. And there's more parcels of land along Merri Creek. So I look forward to hearing what residents have to say about this, but I imagine residents will be keen to keep access to the land.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any other councillors like to speak on this item?
Yep.
Councillor Farnley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think we had a resident earlier tonight coming to query about Outlook Drive and passionately speak about council retaining Outlook Drive. And to provide some context, the state government is now undergoing a process of looking at the open space that it or its agencies own and sell it off. The first opportunity is provided to the local council, and what we're doing is going out to consultation to the community to get some feedback on that. It's a bit disappointing that that these lands aren't just sort of transferred. I think the gentleman earlier said we should just take it.
Yep.
I don't know what he meant by that, but the option we do have in order to take it is to pay for it and buy it, and that's what will be considered with Outlook Drive, and I'm sure that's what will be considered with this parcel of land. So thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Rowley?
Oh, look, I just wanted to concur with Councillor Farnley, really. I'm really mystified as to why governments force one other level of government to actually have to pay for these lands. It seems a nonsense. It's our asset, and why they just cannot transfer from one level of government to another. We'd love to look after it and keep it, and if we have to pay for that, so be it. But it does mystify me. When I was working with the AIDS Council and on the board of the AIDS Council, a number of times when we were having to get businesses or to get properties, this is 20 years ago, this kind of nonsense was going on then, and it still continues. And I just don't understand why federal and state governments can't actually just gift the land to another benevolent democratic level of government like the local government. And I just find it absolutely mystifying. And we are in a state election year, and I just think this is something that should be raised in that election, because it costs us, it costs you as the ratepayers every time this happens. And not only that, costs us around the angst and the amount of consultation and all the work that it actually diverts us from what we're actually doing. It's actually a diversion, and it's really a waste. I just think it's ridiculous.
Just before I allow further speakers, I'm allowing speakers on this because this is impacting very highly on Moreland, these continual land sales, and therefore, even if they're speakers in favour, etc., I'm letting every councillor have a say. Councillor,
I'm just saying it's also very hypocritical that it's their land but we maintain it. And so maybe we should work out a cost of about $1 million a year for us to maintain the land and take it off the sale price. It does end up going that way.
Thank you,
Councillor. It costs about 1.6 million, so let's be conservative and rate it at $1 million.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Tabernos, did you want to speak?
Look, I'm going to speak briefly as well, even though we're all in agreement, but just to express my frustration as well at this process. And for as long as I've been on council, these parcels of land just keep coming. So this is not the first, second, the third, the fourth one. They just keep coming, and it's unfortunate because what occurs now is that we have to put up either rates money or money from the open space reserve for the purchase of these parcels of land. And they're significant parcels at significant dollars. And what that means is that we also need to consider the opportunity cost of what other parcels of land could have been considered with that money. So we now have a strategy, Park Close to Home, which this council has recently adopted, which is really about identifying gap areas in our city, areas that doesn't have open space at all, and areas which have great densities, particularly new developments, apartments. And let's not forget that it is the people in these apartments that have contributed to the open space contribution, because the open space contribution is a levy on the developments of these apartments. So where we should be spending that money is where in these areas, and we need to divert money and not spend it there, not spend it where our population is, not spend it in the highly dense new areas, but actually have to buy existing parkland, existing open space. So it is a little bit cost shifting, and it's very unfortunate. And we have some great ambitions here in this council through a Park Close to Home to create new open space in Brunswick. And what we're seeing is all of that money is slowly going back into securing the creek corridors, which are important and are a priority. But I wish they were just granted to us by state government, so we can actually put that money where it really should go, and that is in our suburban areas where we have the greatest densities. So that's
Thank you,
my
Councillor
frustration.
Tapanos. Are there any other speakers? All right, I'll put that to the vote. Put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to city infrastructure. DCI 1918, replacement of Ronald Street Shared Park Bridge over Edgar Street, Coburg North. I'll do the next one.
Yeah, no, I didn't stand for that. I just wondered if we could put a procedural motion to bring something forward.
Okay, I will take that even though I've announced the thing. Yep. Yes, okay. Which one is it?
So it's the NOM 1018, support for nuclear weapon ban treaty. I just am aware that someone in the gallery who's concerned with that is has to race away because he has a unique situation.
Fine, I'm happy with that. Okay, we're going to bring that forward, councillors. So that's on page 870 of the agenda. Just before we move it, we'll just let people have a chance to get it up on their iPads. You're happy to go ahead, councillors? Okay. Councillor Abood, it was your notice of motion. You're obviously moving it. Do we have a second to Councillor Abood's motion, support for nuclear weapon? Councillor Bolton? Okay, Councillor Abood would like to speak to it, please.
Yes, well, I couldn't say that it was my notice of motion, even though I did submit it, but it's certainly not my work. This is work that's been going on for a very long time in this city, and I think that that's reiterated by the fact that there were several councillors who were ready to second this notice of motion, and I'd like to commend Tomohiro Matsuoka for his work and for the little bit of a push that he gave me to put this forward, and I'm actually really surprised that it hasn't happened yet. Many of you will be aware that ICAN, which was started down in Carlton, I believe, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, won a Nobel Peace Prize recently for all of their work with regard to just talking about how destructive and unnecessary nuclear weapons are. The nature of the notice of motion is to express our regret as Moreland councillors, but I know that goes much broader, that the federal government hasn't signed up to the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. One of my personal heroes was across the other side of the world while this wasn't happening, and it was very devastating to see, as you know, a kid that used to go to anti-nuclear disarmament rallies with my badge and my bicycle and this sort of thing, that now I'm 46 years old, 40 years later, we still think that it's okay to not speak up against nuclear disarmament or not speak for nuclear disarmament. So I have no qualms, and I'm very proud to be able to stand here and put this forward.
Councillor Bolton, Mr. Secretary, would you like to speak to it?
I'll wait and see.
It's probably best to take your opportunity now, because if no one speaks against it, you might not get an opportunity. So would you like to... It's probably best if you're going to speak.
People have sometimes been able to
we've
speak later.
We've tightened up a bit. Oh, well, anyway.
Okay.
I think it's probably going to go for it now, if that's all right.
Okay, there's a change of procedure. All of a sudden. Moreland is very well justified in passing a motion like this, expressing regret in Australia not signing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Moreland is one of the councils that many years ago recognised the tragedy that is Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like an incredible mass destruction of humanity. We've got many people in this municipality who've been involved in the international campaign against nuclear weapons, and it is quite a massive effort that they have brought this treaty onto the books of the United Nations, although, you know, some of the major countries that are involved with nuclear weapons have not signed up to it, and including with Australia's alliances. I think we absolutely do need a world where nuclear weapons are removed. Even if nuclear weapons aren't used, the very process of producing nuclear weapons is a real threat. You know, there are all sorts of nuclear-armed ships and submarines going through the Pacific, and you know, just simply an accident, even without a deliberate firing of these weapons, even just accidents can have a terrible, terrible impact, and could have a terrible, terrible impact on us in Melbourne if there were nuclear-armed submarines that came within the vicinity of our coastline. So, I mean, I think we do have, even though some people might say that this is not local government business, in another sense it is local government business, because these sort of weapons are so destructive, and they can absolutely have an effect on people here, right in Moreland, if there was an accident with a nuclear-armed submarine or ship coming to our shores in Victoria.
Okay, are there any speakers? Yeah. Okay.
Just briefly, I just want to concur with and thank people for putting this on the table. The reason why I'm wanting to speak is because there are a number of things that are creating a lot of anxiety and stress in our community, and as a councillor you get that on a fairly regular basis. I got some of it earlier tonight from somebody in the audience. I think the level of frustration with some of your elected representatives. When I woke up this morning, one of the things I heard was that the world's actually, according to one of these experts in the media, that the crisis internationally at the moment is actually worse than it was in the Cuban crisis in the early 60s, just after I was born. So that's quite a long time ago, and things must be pretty bad. But there are a lot of other bigger items, I believe, that are creating a lot of anxiety and stress in our communities. And this one should have been laid to bed a long time ago because of the waste. But the other huge issue that's starting to emerge now is the use of chemicals and in warfare. And if we think that the nuclear issue has been addressed, well, we've still got another huge raft of issues to deal with that. So I'm perhaps adding to the anxieties tonight, but really this is such a simple issue in my view that we need to be working towards peace and working together with each other and treating each other gently and kindly and with respect. And I'll do that to you if you do that to me, and I'd invite everyone else to continue to do that. And this is one way we can continue to try and make it Moreland a better place. So I really appreciate the people who put this on the table.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Councillor Tubbs.
Very briefly, I too am supportive of this motion, and I just wanted to point out that this is not a recent position, but I believe the Brunswick City Council many years ago in the 80s was a nuclear-free council as far as it had, and Coburg was as well. So we are consistent in our advocacy against nuclear weapons, and this is something that is in line with that long-held view. And by all means, of course, we should be advocating to the Prime Minister.
Okay. Yes, you're speaking against?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Look, I typically don't stand up to speak when I vote against these ones. Just to provide the gallery a little bit of context. So this motion is about abolition of nuclear weapons. I think it's a very worthy topic, and I'm quite supportive of that. But when I ran for local council, the promise I made to the residents was I'm an independent council that will focus on local issues. So that's why I'm voting against this. I don't think this is something that Moreland needs to take time to get involved in. We've got a number of questions tonight on planning and people concerned about, is there going to be 4 stories next to my house? Is there going to be open space on Edwards car park? You know, those are local things that we really should be spending time debating. So I'm just keeping my promise to the voters. I don't have anything against Councillor Abood actually moving this, because she clearly ran as a Greens candidate that will focus on Greens issues, and this is consistent with how she ran her campaign. So I'm just being consistent with how I ran mine, that's all.
Okay, so there's been a person speak, so I'll just check it out. Any other speakers? Now, we've had a person against, so then the mover does have the right to close the debate.
Oh, no, I don't need to.
Okay, fine, then we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried.
Can I please call for a division?
Okay, I think a division. I'll just ask for a division, so councillors who are in favour of the motion, could you raise your hand again? Okay, so that's everyone other than Councillor Farnley. Okay. That's right. We clear? No. And those against? Thank you. Okay. Declare that carried, and we move back to the agenda and to the area that we'll... So we're looking at DCI 1918, replacement of Ronald Street Shared Path Bridge over Edgars Creek, Coburg North, and Councillor Riley is on his feet. Are you moving the officer recommendation, Councillor Riley?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Right. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dorney. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Look, I just want to commend the community for their participation in this process and the officers. I've received some communication from locals about principally around the delay and the length of time it's going to take for this bridge to be built. The option that we're recommending tonight, and I'm supporting, is the option for a 100-year flood bridge, which will mean that it's going to have to be higher and longer and more costly. Actually, not necessarily more costly, but fairly, at least as costly as some of the other bridges, which might be a 1 in 25-year flood or a 1 in 50-year flood. The nature of these kinds of infrastructure projects are quite huge, and at the scale of what we do as a council, they are in the very complex and involved processes, so they do take time. And the other reason why, some of the reasons I believe the council that this is going to take some time is we're trying to create a bridges reserve fund through our budget to be able to fund this bridge and the one near the series, which will be crossing there, which will also be a 100-year flood. There's still a lot of work to be done on this. There's more designs and technical designs to be done, which take time. We need to also get the planning permits in place, which also other things, as you know. We just heard tonight on some of the submissions around question time, how planning is complex and involved that is, and it's another reason why it's going to add to the time taken. So I think as a council, I don't really want to build a bridge that's going to be washed away in the next 1 in 25-year flood or 1 in 50-year flood. I want us to have a bridge that's going to be around for future generations. And given the impact of global warming and climate change, there are these enormous storm bombs. I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but they are now impacting more frequently around the globe. And Mother Nature forbid, I hope she's not going to do that to us around Edgars Creek or anywhere around our boundaries. But if it does happen, you can very well imagine that it'd be washed away. Even a 1 in a 100-year flood may have a bridge that's built for that standard may have trouble withstanding a storm of those natures. And if you've seen some of them on YouTube and where else, they're quite scary. And I'm adding to the anxieties again, but really just wanted to put a strong case for having us to build the best bridge with the best investment, and it's going to take some time, and unfortunately I know that's going to frustrate a lot of Edgars Creek locals, but I hope that they'll work with us, and there will still be some time to massage this and get it right before we actually get to build it in perhaps, I would hate to say actually, 3 to 4 or 5 years' time. It's just going to depend a bit on some of those factors. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. The seconder was Councillor Dorney. Do you want to speak to him, Councillor Dorney?
I don't have any real additional points to make. I just concur with Mark's comments. With global warming, we're seeing events such as the one that took out this bridge more and more, and we need our assets to be ready and resilient for that. This option 1B on the report, is ready for a 1 in 100-year flood. It was a 1 in 50-year flood that actually took out this bridge, and the other options propose resilience for a capacity of a 1 in 10 year flood scenario. So, yeah, that's why I'm seconding.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. Are there any other speakers? Yes.
Just a brief point. I'm totally supportive of this motion, but certainly I hope that we can look at ways of bring it forward if possible. If the design work goes faster than normal, or any element of the project can be brought forward, I think that's really important. I know the other bridge project that we're reserving money for, the one of the Merri Creek near Ceres, is also a very vital bridge link. But I especially think this bridge, because it was the only option for people to be able to cross the creek for a long distance, and it really has made people's lives very difficult. So I'd certainly urge council to continue to look at its budget and see at various times if it is possible to bring this funding and this project forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Speak to it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to. I lived a stone's throw from this bridge for 10 years, and then I moved 400 metres away. So I'm very familiar with this bridge, which is here. There's another bridge here, which now has a made path through the wetlands. And I know that we're calling it a 1 in 50 year flood, but that bridge was wiped out. In the last 10 years, it's been wiped out maybe 4 or 5
That's
times.
correct.
And we've repaired it each of those times until the last time. And then I think it was wiped out just before the completion of the Dosheen bridge, which cost a lot of money and also was wiped out regularly. And I firmly believe that although there is an inconvenience for people to have to walk a longer walk along the made path or schlep up the track, which is quite beautiful, but it is a hard slog, there would be simply no point whatsoever making this bridge unless we do it properly. And so I'm very inclined to support the officer's recommendations, and I commend the report that's been prepared for us.
Okay, thank you. I'll put this to the vote now. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. DCI 1018, Contract 610T, Panel of Engineering Consultancy Services. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Riley. Would you like to speak to it? No. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Riley? If there's no speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move to social development, and we have the draft Fleming Master Plan, and Councillor Dorney is on her feet. Councillor Dorney, you're moving an alternative recommendation?
Yeah, I'd like to do some alternative recommendations.
And we'll have a look at that, and then I'll ask for a seconder before you get to speak to it. So, seeing as there's parts, but the parts that weren't on the agenda, if you could read that for the benefit of the public gallery.
Yep. They've all changed slightly.
Okay, we'll read them all then. That's fine.
So I'll just read them all. Sorry if I bore you all. Endorses the draft Fleming Park Master Plan as attachment 1 to this report for public consultation until 13th of May 2018. Endorses the plan consultation that this will be occurring for the draft Fleming Park Master Plan as outlined in section 4 of the report, including notices in the Moreland and Northern Leader newspapers, promotion on council's website, park drop-in sessions, signage and letterbox drops. 3, invites feedback and written submissions in response to the draft Fleming Park Master Plan. And 4, receives a report at the July 2018 council meeting, which includes the submissions and community feedback received through the draft master plan consultation, and presents the final strategy for adoption.
Thank you. Now, do we have a seconder for Councillor Riley? Would you like to speak to a Councillor Dawn?
Mm-hmm. So I'd just like, this is quite similar to the actual officer's recommendations, but I just felt the need to just detail some of the detail that's actually included in the report as to the objective and transparent process that is happening around the development of this master plan. This is a huge and extensive body of work, and I commend everyone involved, including the officers at council and the independent architects who led this work. It's not easy balancing differing views and considering everything that a plan like this has to consider, and I think this draft plan has done so quite well, and I look forward to hearing what the community now has to say about that. Yeah, I highly recommend people have a read and provide your comment, whether it's good, bad or indifferent. Yeah, I know that there were some key considerations with the plan, and one of the key community concerns was around making sure that we didn't increase the building footprint of this park. And that's been one key consideration that I can see in this report, and just getting people's feedback on what they think about how that has creatively been used in the park, and how it's actually through the new use of that existing building space and increased access through new pathways and access points in between those buildings to create more movement in them. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Dorney. The seconder, Councillor Riley, would you like to speak?
Look, just briefly, I want to concur with Councillor Dorney's comments, but also to really draw people's attentions to the kind of principles that the reference group have come up with. And I think they're a great set of principles that we've tried to use as a guiding or yardstick or guidance for us as a community and how we go forward with this. So, you know, I was part of the move to try and get this refresh happening, and it's been involved, and it does take a lot of effort, but I think the reference group is a good way to help flesh out and flush out some of the ideas and some of the problems or some of the challenges and some of the opportunities with this site. And I think by now taking that good work and then coming back out to the community and getting more input is a great way of doing that, and I look forward to hearing some more about that and having those discussions with people in a respectful manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. And Councillor Bolton.
I've got an amendment which I sent through before, which was to the original point 3, but now that this alternative resolution's been moved, it'll be to point 4, amendment to point 4 of the new resolution.
Okay, so a replacement of the current one there, or
it would include part of it, so I'll just read it out. Okay, receives a final version of the Fleming Park Master Plan for consideration following the completion of the consultation process and a review of the draft Fleming Park Master Plan and consultation feedback by an independent practitioner in open space planning before the final strategy is adopted.
Okay, all right. Ed, understand that. The mover is Councillor Dorney. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Dorney?
No, and I'm happy to do that. That's fine.
Okay. You won't probably have to, but okay, thank you. I'll second on that. So, okay. Is there anyone who'd like to second? You would? Right, Councillor Tapanos. Okay, seconding. Right, so then, okay, so we'll move to, you may speak to that now if you like, Councillor Bolton. So at the moment, we're only talking about Councillor Bolton's point 4, which has been moved by her and seconded by Councillor Tapanos. Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Well, firstly, I don't particularly want to have to move this amendment tonight, because I would like to just be able to, put this out to community consultation, because I think, the whole, this has gone on for quite a few years now. But I think there is, what I've picked up is a certain amount of community consternation about the proposals around Fleming Park, and it does seem that there are quite a lot of conflicting views about the plans for the park. And this is quite an expensive job, something along the lines of $11 million. So I think I would prefer us to take not a massive extra time, not years and years, but a little bit of extra time to give the public, the local residents, confidence that we're listening to their viewpoints, especially as there are quite a lot of uses happening in this park, and I think that's where some of the conflict has arisen. So I feel that we need to give residents some sureness in our consultation processes that they are genuinely being listened to, and it's with a view to thinking about the long-term future of this park, given the massive population increase that especially East Brunswick is going to be going through in the coming years, in the near coming years. So I'd like to ask councillors to support this amendment.
Okay, so seconded to amendment.
Very briefly, because I think Councillor Bolton said it all. But for me, if we're investing so much money into Fleming Park, there is no harm in getting an opinion from an open space planning expert. It is a premier facility. It is well utilised and overutilised and at capacity. And I'm fully supportive of the works thus far, and I think that's some great work has gone in there, and I recognise that there's always going to be difference of opinions and difference of priorities for the park. But if we are investing so much money, in about $11.5 million in the long term here, what is wrong with getting an expert opinion on the final master plan?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Riley?
Yes, obviously. I just want to say that I think that this motion might be something you would consider after we've done some public consultation. And I don't understand why we should do this now before we're actually getting more input. I also think it calls into question the professionalism of our officers and the professionalism of the consultants that we paid highly for. And I would like to know how much you're suggesting we should pay for this when we're still going through a process. Sometimes you can talk about consultation by death, and I think that if you continue to do this kind of thing, and it actually muddies the water in my view and makes it more complex and more difficult by calling for some sort of independence. I don't believe there is a community response to this. There is one person that I'm aware of that's been making loud noises around this, and it's not been a community issue. And I believe today, I've had emails about this today, and it's based on what I believe are fake news. And I'm meeting that person tomorrow, and I'll be telling them, talking to them about that. I'm quite frustrated by it. It makes my job harder as a councillor, and it's questioning the veracity, the professionalism of our staff, and it's not good enough. I actually stand here to defend them, and I think this motion is actually feeding into that, and it's actually not doing us any good. I actually really think it's quite serious.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Any speakers, in support of the amendment? Okay, well, if there's no, we've had speakers against and in favour, so I'm going to put the amendment. Okay, so we're voting now on the amendment moved by Councillor Bolton and seconded by Councillor Tapanos. Those councillors in favour of the amendment? Those against? That's lost, and we move back to the substantive motion. Right. Are there any speakers against the substantive motion? Because it's an important one, I will continue it on. Okay, any speakers in favour of the substantive motion?
Yes, thank you. Well, I am pleased to see that we're finally starting to make some progress at Fleming Park. This was something that was flagged 4 or 5 years ago, and it was certainly even earmarked in a draft budget for significant investment, and then it got delayed for this final refresh of the master plan. So I'm really pleased to see the retention of the grandstand. I know that it's been the subject of this chamber in previous council terms a number of times, and I recall from about 5 years ago the grandstand was saved by 1 vote, and it's really great to see that after the consultation that has actually occurred, it is recommended for it to be retained and restored and used by the public. So I'm pleased about that. But I do think that it is, as I was saying previously, a premier facility, a premier park. There's so much usage, there's so much going on at Fleming Park, and it does warrant the investments that we have earmarked. And I'm really pleased to see this report, and I really look forward to what's to come. I hope we can get it right and we can satisfy all of the community But I know that whatever we do, it is going to be money well spent and well utilised. Whatever community assets we have there or open space, it's definitely going to be well utilised. So I'm really pleased to see progress, and I really hope that this is a really big priority area for the council going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay, being no further speakers, I'll put the substantive motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Okay, can we make that listed as unanimous? Yep. Thank you. DSD 818, Sports Surface Needs Analysis. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Yildiz. Have a seconder? Councillor Bolton. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Yildiz? Councillor Bolton.
I actually think it's great that Council has done this piece of work. It was also interesting hearing the comments of the resident earlier about the impact of synthetic pitches on the urban heat island effect. So that is something for us to look at in the future. I really thank that resident for raising that point because, you know, urban heat island effect goes into so many different areas. But meanwhile, I'm still happy to support this motion and this report. So I think it's a step forward.
Are there any speakers against? Being no speakers against, I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Acknowledging the legacy of Peter Norman, would you like to move that, Councillor Bolton?
I will.
Yeah.
I am pleased to see this.
Sorry, I'll just get a seconder first and they'll get you to speak to it. That's all right. Seconder, Councillor Yildiz. Yes, please, Councillor Bolton.
I am pleased to see this come back, that there are some recommendations to acknowledge the legacy of Peter Norman. For people who don't know who Peter Norman is, he was an athlete. He's still he actually was born in the Northcote area, but he had a close association with the Coburg and Brunswick areas, both as an athlete in the Coburg Harriers, as a coach or trainer for Brunswick West footy team, and also as a TAFE teacher and various other occupations in the Moreland area. But the reason he is known by some people is because he was that third athlete on the days at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico who supported the Black American athletes when they did the Black Salute. And as a result of his anti-racism stance, he was penalised by various sporting bodies on his return to Australia. And I think given he had these ties with Moreland and given that his record has been partially obliterated from some of the sporting records, even though he still holds the Australian record in his signature race, I think it is fitting that Moreland make some sort of acknowledgement of Peter's record in the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to it? Are there any speakers against? Being no speakers against, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next we have is DSD 1018, Support for Life Education Programs. Would you like to move that, Councillor Davidson? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Abood. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Davidson?
Yes, just briefly, and if it's okay, I might add just a very brief amendment.
Yes, you can. So you can move. Well, okay. So can you give us the amendment, and then could take that as substantive.
It's an additional point that council investigate ways in which Moreland can participate and get involved in October, which is
yes
a month of no drink consuming alcohol.
No worries. If that's acceptable to Councillor
Absolutely.
Abood, all right. So we'll make that the original motion. All right. No. In essence, so yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's.
It is an unusual spelling. It's not.
It's like October, but October.
Oh yeah. It's sober in October. Yeah. I think there might be. No, there's no T.
Yes, the S is the T.
That's correct.
Okay.
So
All right, I'm
sober.
glad we've got the
Because the S is for sober, yeah.
Right, yep, sober.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you may recall, I remember when the bus came to my school with the giraffe inside, and they taught us about life things for children from from 5 all the way up to 12 years of age, and they teach you things about alcohol consumption, about nutrition, about safety, about respectful relationships. It was something that was very exciting for me at school, and something that I think should be promoted to the schools of Moreland. And I'm very pleased to see that material from Life Education is going to be provided at the Moreland Principals Breakfast, which is coming up in May on the 24th. I hope that the schools in Glenroy and Fawkner are able to take this on, and that the state government, if necessary, can subsidise some of the cost. It's $9, but for some parents, it is a bit of a stretch when they're struggling themselves financially. So it's a great initiative that this not-for-profit organisation has. It's engaging and highly memorable for children. And also the October, a month of not consuming alcohol. I know that within Australia there's a huge drinking culture, and it's becoming quite a problem. And it's good to make people aware about the benefits of abstaining for a period of time or not drinking to excess. So I hope that my fellow councillors can support this.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. And Councillor Abood?
Yeah, look, I'm supporting it with pride. I think it's fantastic, great initiative and all heart, which is what I've come to expect from you, Councillor Davidson. I especially love the amendment of someone who is 2 years and 2 months sober. I definitely think that not consuming alcohol is a very good idea. But also because I have small children who need all the education they can get about all of this extra pressure that comes to people from, outside the world, and it's great to know about this stuff. So it's great. I love it.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. Any speakers against the motion? Okay, then I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. DED 16/18 level crossing removals. Can you sort it out between you?
Go down.
Okay. Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'm happy to move the officer report with one slight amendment, and that is to add a 4th dot point.
No, that's not it. Is that it?
No, that's not it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent it around earlier. So I'm happy to talk to the amendment first.
Okay. So you're moving the whole thing?
Yeah. So I'm moving the whole thing with a slight amendment.
No worries. So I'll just that's okay. I'll just get a seconder to what's on the board now. Councillor. No, you're happy to second it. Councillor Tapanos, you're happy to second that. Okay. All right. Got it.
Thank you,
Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. This is a fantastic report. This has been prepared for the people of Moreland. We've got level crossing removals happening all over our city, and what we want to do is we want to maximise the bang for your buck when we're doing these level crossing removals. We want cyclists, pedestrians, motorists, commuters, everyone involved to get the best possible outcome for the people of Moreland. So what we're doing with this report is we're actually putting a trench study and a Skyrail study out to the public for people to look at and to see, and to use that to lobby the state government, if they so wish, for a whole-of-line solution on the upfield line. And there's heaps of work has gone into that report, and I think it's a really fantastic report. I do encourage everyone to pick it up and have a read of it. And as Councillor Tapanos said before, this is to enable the people of Moreland to make a decision. We are not deciding for you. We are just assisting the people of Moreland with essentially what is the state government's homework. It's the state government's project, and we've done their homework for them to enable our residents to be able to lobby them. The 4th point on here is just to promote the report in an accessible location on our website, to share some of the images and some of the information across social media to assist with the engagement process that the Level Crossing Removal Authority is running. So I really do encourage everyone to pick up the report, have a read, and if there's something that you think we should be doing, then please use it to lobby the state government and the Level Crossing Removal Authority. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tapanos, just a second.
Mayor, councillors and members of the public, this is a city-shaping project. And it's not every day that you get to be at the early stages of such change. This could do great things for Moreland. It could increase our local amenity. It would certainly remove congestion in our city. And it would remove these level crossings, which are dangerous. And we've seen, at least once or twice a year, we do see accidents at these level crossings. So this is a great policy from the Andrews Labor government. It is work that has been started many, many years ago by, I think, Moreland and Darebin and a lot of councils advocating for level crossing removals, particularly Coburg and Glenroy. So it's great to be able to have a government that is making this change. Unfortunately, for the upfield line, we only got 2 crossings in our city and 1 just over the ring road into Hume. What we want is to see a whole line solution. We want to see all of those level crossings removed, and we want to make sure that it's done in a way that it's cost effective for the state of Victoria, but also beneficial for our residents. And we want it to improve the local amenity, make it easier for commuters on trains, and make it easier for pedestrians and people in vehicles by removing some of the congestion caused. So what I think we really need to do is raise our voice over the next 7 months in the lead up to the state campaign to try to get a commitment for more level crossings. Now, there are options, and you will notice it in the report which is being released, for elevated rail and for also a trench below ground option as well. But what we're really seeking from the community is to get behind this campaign, envisage what could occur and what our city could look like in the future if we actually got the whole line removed. So if we all get on board and we advocate strongly to the state government, I think we can achieve it. And I know that future generations will look back in this council and say, wow, that was quite innovative thinking at the time. It continued, it did the work, and these reports are just that. It's doing the homework, and now it's time to lobby and get it done, and we have a great opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Now, because it's a major report, even if you're speaking in favour, I'm happy to take it. So are there any other speakers either in favour or against? Okay. Yes, Councillor Bolt.
I think one of the things, depending on what option the government goes with, there is the opportunity, especially with the elevated rail option, of not only removing a whole lot of level crossings, but of an expansion of the upfield bike path, perhaps even a bike path on the other side of the railway line. Because when I look at that path, especially in some of the Brunswick areas, it's I can't see how you could expand the path. You've got brick wall to brick wall, and it's a major highway, and the interaction between commuter cyclists, which are numerous now, and pedestrians and people with little kids and so forth, it's sort of very dangerous. It's at a real, I think it is overdue to have another bike path on the upfield line to relieve some of the pressure, so that perhaps we could separate bikes and pedestrians a bit more and so forth. So I think the level crossing removal project should be seen in that light, that it could, depending on what choices the Level Crossing Authority makes, it could be a way that we can relieve some of that pressure. I do hope that in our discussions with Level Crossing Authority, that they don't do what they've done in some parts of Melbourne, Campbellfield, Moonee Ponds, etc., where they've carried out a solution which has made cycling and cycling infrastructure much more difficult. So anyway, there's a lot of issues, and I wish I'd like to see this crossing removal go up as far as O'Hay Street, where there are massive problems in terms of traffic. But anyway, I mean, this is great that this work's been done.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. If there's no further speakers, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We're on to DED 1718, review of guidelines for the exercise of delegation for planning applications, and Councillor Farnley is on his feet.
Happy to move the council officer's recommendation.
Okay, the Councillor Farnley moving the officer recommendation and Councillor Martin seconding. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, look, these guidelines are reviewed every 4 to 5 years. Planning is a ever-evolving space, so it's important to keep on top of it, make sure that our guidelines are as modern as possible, that reflects the conditions that are coming through. Look, the key change to call out here will be that when a planning application is to be called to the Urban Planning Committee, it needs to be supported by 2 councillors instead of 1. That's good governance and encourages collaboration between councillors to talk about applications of concern. And that's really the only key change. Other than that, the vast majority of the guidelines remain the same.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
No, I'm okay.
Is there any councillor who'd like to speak against the motion? Would you like to speak in favour? Yes.
Against an aspect of the motion.
Okay, probably against it.
I'd actually like to move an amendment.
Okay, right, okay.
Which is that amend point 1 by adding the following words at the end of point 1, with point A of the guidelines to read any councillor so requests.
So that's point 2, is it? Yeah. I think you're fine.
It's
point 2. And the third one changes too, or that's the only thing that changes?
That's all.
Okay, so is that change, adding that to point 2, acceptable to the mover or the seconder? No, okay. Does Councillor Bolton have a seconder for her motion? Sorry, Councillor Bolton, it lapses for want of a seconder. Okay, all right, so we move back to the substantive motion. Are there any other speakers, either for or against the substantive motion? Okay, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. We move on to DED 1818, Amendment C164, Brunswick Activity Centre Industrial Land Rezoning, Decision, Gateway 2, Consideration of Submissions and a request for a panel. And I have Councillor Martin on his feet. Councillor Martin?
I'd like to move the officer recommendation.
Okay, and do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Abu. All right, so yes, you can speak to it now, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So as councillor responsible for urban planning in the city, I'm really happy to move this motion. I know the tremendous amount of work that has gone into preparing this. I would really like to thank the 135 submitters who actually made a submission to this report. It is something that we do read these submissions, we do really value the submissions, and as a result of some of them, we've seen just north of Methven Park, the height reduced so it doesn't overshadow the park, or a future development there. So that's something that's really positive that came out of the submission process. I would like to also assure to all residents that there is, after the rezoning process, there is really strong protections in place for residents for height, setback, visual bulk within the scheme. And so any permit that is placed after the rezoning process will be judged against the scheme at that time. And so I really want to reassure residents that we're not just letting them build whatever they want. This is the rezoning process, and then the scheme comes into play after that. And also as well, I really do encourage residents, if you do wish to, please attend the independent panel and put your case forward, because that is the brilliant part of an independent panel, is that it's not council, and if we have got it wrong, they may recommend that we change something. So I really do encourage you to take part in that process before it comes back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bird is the seconder. Would you like to speak to it?
What I'd like to do is just commend Richard Tolliday for preparing this report and picking up the anomaly about the 5 to 7 stories that abuts Methven Park, which was probably highlighted to him through something that a resident might have put forward, but also to encourage people to engage with this, as I've encouraged people to engage with all of the other things that are going out for consultation.
Okay. Are there any other speakers on this? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
I'd like to add some words at the end of point 3. This is regarding the contamination or potential contamination, and the words would be, in addition, that council makes public the appendices to the assessment for potential contamination report by Golda.
Okay,
I couldn't see them in the council report.
Yeah, we'll get that on the.
You'll read that, Sue.
Yes, could just one more time, Councillor Bolton. The
The
council makes
Golda
public.
report is in our council documents. He makes reference to an appendix.
No, just read,
which is
read
there.
it.
Yeah.
So, in addition, that council makes public the appendices, and then I've just simply repeated the name of the report, the appendices to the assessment for potential contamination report by Golda.
Okay.
I couldn't see them in the council report.
Can I just confirm with the director that there's no confidential information in there? We're able to disclose that information.
Through the Mayor, I was waiting for confirmation earlier tonight whether there was anything confidential. My understanding is, though, that they were publicly available. They just weren't put in the agenda because of the size. So my understanding is they should be made available.
I'm happy with it if that's the case.
Okay, Councillor Martin, and you are Councillor Bird? Okay, so that, because it's acceptable to the mover and seconder, that becomes a substantive motion now. Would you like to speak at all to it, Councillor Bolton?
Extremely briefly, I just raised that because residents raised some concerns earlier tonight about the feeling that the guarantees in terms of contamination aren't terribly strong. And I can certainly sympathise with that viewpoint. So I'm just really seeking to make maximum information available, and I think without the appendices to the potential contamination report, residents won't really be able to make a proper assessment about the information in that report. It's only a small thing, probably needs to be a lot more, but that's that would be helpful for residents, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Is there any more discussion on this?
Yeah, I have an amendment which I circulated during question time. I'm not sure if it's there. I guess I could probably read it whilst we wait for it to get up on the screen. That is to replace dot point 2, add the following words. Endorse the responses to submissions outlined in this report and included in attachment 1 to this report to form part of the basis of council submissions to the independent planning panel with the following changes. A, area 52 and 220 Albion Street be rezoned to neighbourhood residential zone, NRZ, and removed from the activity centre. The adjoining properties are in the NRZ with many subject to heritage controls, and therefore this zone is more appropriate. B, the land at 13-15 Edward Street, also known as the Edward Street Car Park, into public purpose zone for future development of public open space. This area is identified as high priority in the Park Close to Home strategy recently adopted. And C, that further exhibition take place for the proposed changes with submissions forwarded directly to the independent panel.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Tapanos. Now, before I look for a seconder, is it acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
No.
No. Okay, do we have a seconder for Councillor Tapanos? Councillor Afanway is seconding Councillor Tapanos's amendment.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors and Councillor Farnley. Look, in particular, we've heard from submissions and we've heard from the gallery tonight that although this Mills strategy is quite welcomed and we do need to rezone some land, there are a couple of areas that really are misplaced within the activity centre. I think 220 Albion Street is a really easy one because it's on the other side of the railway line. Yes, it's an existing warehouse, and therefore it was part of our industrial strategy. But in reality, right across on the other side of the railway line, what you were seeing is residential, single story, a few double story residential developments. So this is an opportunity, councillors, to actually combine our industrial mills strategy and take into consideration our new residential zones. And I say new, they've probably been adopted now and in our planning scheme for about two to 3 years. But when we've looked at mills and we've developed that strategy, we've looked at all existing industrial land. But we never really asked ourselves, should this parcel, for its location, really be located in a residential area? What is the prevailing neighbourhood area and zone around it? And I think that when you take that consideration, the appropriate zone is the neighbourhood residential zone. I think if you have a look at area 52, you will notice that it's included in a heritage overlay. And every other area that is residentially zoned in a heritage overlay is also in the neighbourhood residential zone. So councillors, what I'm saying is these are minor errors in my view that need to be corrected. Yes, they're inconsistent with our current strategies, but that's because we always looked at our strategies in isolation. We always looked at industrial as part of industrial. We always looked at our residential zones and only our residential zones. We never had that process where we said, okay, this is industrial, but really should be residential. And I think that it's time now that we correct this before we send it to the independent panel. Point B, I think it's one that's subject to a lot of discussion in this chamber and also a lot of submissions and petitions. And I think it is time that this council listened, because we've done the strategic work, and that is our strategy in regards to open space and where the gap areas are. And this area is identified, I think it might be the second highest priority area for new open space in our city. And we have a council asset which is underutilised, just sitting there. So what we can do tonight is send a strong message to the community that our real objective is to have a public park in this space. I know that councillors verbally and outside of this chamber commit to it, but let's do it in the chamber. Let's change the zone. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Farnley? No, thank you. Any other speakers to the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? It's lost. So we go back to the substantive motion. Are there any other speakers to the substantive motion? Being no further speakers, we're going to put the substantive motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Have a division thing.
Call for a division. So those who are in favour, could you raise your hand again, please? That's... Everyone except Councillor Tapanoff. Everyone except Councillor Tapanoff. Against? Yes. Everyone against. That's correct. Thank you. We've got that noted now. We go to DED 1918, Amendment C167, Decision Gateway 2, Consideration of Submissions and Adoption of Amendment. And we have Councillor Martin on his feet. Are you moving the officer recommendation?
I'm moving the officer recommendation with a slight
okay,
change.
So we'll have a look at that change before I ask for a seconder. So the point that changes is you had a 0.6?
No, this is replacing 0.5.
Okay, right. Okay, so the 0.5 that's current, the first 0.5 that's there should be deleted. Am I correct in?
Yeah, I'm just having a look to see if that is. That's the one.
Okay, would you like to read that for the benefit of those?
So it's changing 0.5 to read delegates to the Director of Planning Economic Development Authority to make changes to Amendment C167 based on Council's decision for this report, any changes by the Minister for Planning, any changes to the relevant documents to carry any errors and grammatical changes, and I can speak to that.
Okay, so just a second. So everything else stays the same?
Yes.
That's moved by Councillor Martin. Do we have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Abboud. Yes, you may speak to it now, Councillor Martin.
So the reason for the change to number 5 there is just to account for the errors that were picked up in C164, especially around Methven Park. This is actually just moving that into the structure plan also. Otherwise, if we don't move that, it doesn't allow the Director of Planning and Economic Development to make those changes that are required, and then we would have that discrepancy between the structure plan and C164. So that's the reason for the changes.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Did you want to speak any more about it? Okay, Councillor Abboud. Are there any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Right, we move to DED 2018 Bree Street Car Park Open Space Opportunity, and Councillor Farnley is on his feet.
I have an additional point, and that becomes.
Would you like to read that point for the benefit of the public gallery and those watching at home on live streaming?
That was the second one, I think. As part of the point is, it's inserting point 2.
Okay, so what was point 2 becomes point 3,
that's
and
right.
your insert of point 2 says?
It says, as part of the feasibility, specifically explores an option where the developer provides at its own cost replacement public car parking on its site, using the same approach as a tip-top development.
Okay.
Now, I also just wanted to include 2 more words on point 3.
Yes.
So it reads, receives a further report, and I'd just like to insert the words by May.
By the May Council meeting?
That's right, yes.
Is that doable? Yeah.
Just
Sure.
through the Mayor, I just think it's worth double checking. So we're in April. To get it to the May meeting, it's going to be ready in a fortnight. So I don't know that we will make that deadline. Is there a particular reason for May?
It's just I'm under the understanding that there's a planning application process in
Okay,
play
so
by
we'll
that.
move it quickly.
That's right.
Yeah.
If it's not feasible, then it's not worth putting in there.
Through the Mayor, it is particularly challenging because there's quite a lot of work to do, but for one of the options to be feasible, it does need to align with when they lodge their application. We don't know how feasible that option is. If it's not, it would be good to have more time to work on the other option. That would be my only...
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm happy to remove those
Okay,
additions.
all right, so we've got... Do you want to speak?
May I?
I'll just get a seconder if possible first. Right, seconded by Councillor Tapanos, and the CEO would like to speak. Yes?
So just the proposed way forward. So I understand exactly what Councillor Farnley is trying to make sure we are able to do on the part that is reliant or has some time frame
Yes.
to return on that part quickly. So I think there might be a way for us to do this where we return on the relevant part in May,
Okay.
but not the whole box and dice.
Okay, so I think my feeling would be that we'll leave it as it is, but we've got the understanding that that's what you're attempting to
That's
do.
fine. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, okay. And so I'll just let Councillor Farnley speak to it first, and then, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think we had a resident earlier tonight highlight the desperate need for more open space in Brunswick. It's absolutely true. There's 2 things that the south of Moreland needs in Brunswick: more open space and more car parking, and we get both of these in this potential proposal. If you've driven around those streets, you'll find it's very difficult to find a car park to visit friends or go to a cafe on Sydney Road. So that car parking is very much loved by the small businesses. But if there's an opportunity to remove that, create a park, but still retain a level of car parking, well, that's a great outcome, both environmentally and from an economic development perspective. I've just inserted an additional point to do the feasibility study and also explore a feasibility study where the developer pays wholly for the car parking, much like the one in the Tip-Top development, and explore that scenario as well. So it's just coming up with the additional option as well.
Okay, just before I go to Councillor Tapanos, you had a question?
Yeah, the question is just to do with the part 2. I'm wondering, is Councillor Farnley suggesting that we explore for the developer at our cost whether it's worth them building a car park or not? And I have another question, which is whether I mean, I don't know how I feel about that idea if that's what is being proposed, but whether if this work is going to happen, it's worth consulting with the developers in terms of the timing of their application to know if this is a realistic thing to try and achieve before, like, it would be sort of a waste of time and energy if we do all this work, but they've already got their application in and nothing that we've discovered is to do with what they're proposing. Like,
I'm happy to answer the question.
yeah, thanks.
Sure. So, just to sort of give you some context, we have the options right now, right? We've got a car park there. We can pay to put those car parks underground and put a park over the top, so to our cost. Or we can pay money to the developer, as in ratepayers' money goes to the developer to provide car parking facilities on their site. That's two options, and that will be debated, whether that's a good use of ratepayers' money. But I'm also aware that there's other developments that have taken place in Moreland, such as the Tip Top development, where the developer, as part of their development, has provided public car parking in their development. So that's what I'd like explored. So I think it's responsible to do so on behalf of the residents, because we need to make sure that we use ratepayers' money effectively.
Okay. Yes, all right. Well,
Sorry, I'm still quite confused. I know about the Tip Top scenario because I alerted you to it. The question is, the council didn't pay for the Tip Top development to do a feasibility. We didn't pay for their feasibility study about whether it was viable to develop that car park. My question is to do with ratepayers' money. Are you suggesting that we use ratepayers' money to determine if that developer, if it's financially viable for them to develop their own car parking?
Happy to answer the question. So the developer will be doing potentially no car parking, but they're offering to do some level of car parking. We don't know what that level is or what that includes. So if what we are doing is removing the car parking from that street and then allowing the car parking to then be happening within the Duckett Street development, then we need to make sure that there's still, you know, the level of car parking available for residents, for our community, for people visiting the area. So what we're doing is actually doing the responsible thing of doing a feasibility study in the event that we are going to give up our car parking completely and not do the undergrounding and allow that to happen within that developer. So it's not doing it for him. They'll be opening it up to the public, which is unusual for a developer to do, but making sure that the level of parking available is compensated with what we actually give up. That's why we need to do it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the seconder because I'm sure that's some chances.
Just before, if it's okay to move up, if we can just amend the Tip Top development and replace it with a section 173 agreement, which is what that method was, if that's correct. I just think it's probably more appropriate, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Well.
Okay,
yeah,
so can I speak?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you still want you want Tip Top mentioned or not?
No, because
okay.
I mean, there's many 173 agreements, so it's probably...
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
That's acceptable. Words.
Yeah. Sorry?
Using the same approach.
Just saying using a section 173.
That's true.
Yeah, 173 agreement.
Correct. Okay,
and,
we're happy with that now.
For the benefit, a 173 agreement is a contract between council and landowner in regards to planning applications and permits. Councillors, this is a really innovative approach to trying to remove some of the obstacles in developing our car parks. And you'll all recall that we have a long-standing strategy called the airspace or air rights strategy in regards to council-owned car parks. And what that really says is that you should take advantage of the air rights by still providing the same amount of car parks. So what we need to do is shift the car park, put it underground or put it in an on-street area, and then utilise the free space to create a park. And this is sort of the vision, I hope, for Edward Street car park and many of the other car parks. In this case, in the Breeze Street, which is our #1 gap priority area, or right up there, and a great area which has huge densities being built. We have an opportunity to potentially work with a developer, and what that would mean is that we can build a public car park underneath an existing development, and that would free up our existing car park to be converted to open space and a park. It would be of great benefit to our community, but it will also be a really big benefit to that developer. It would be a significant benefit to new residents who buy in those apartments, because they would have a public car park and open space green park right adjacent to their apartment. And I guess dot point 2 I'm really supportive of, because it says that the developer should contribute to this. So we shouldn't only investigate it and do it at our cost, at ratepayers' cost, even though even at our cost, it's a worthy project. But how about the developer also contribute towards it? Because it is those residents that are going to be getting the maximum benefit. So I think it's a great idea. It's very innovative, and it may unlock this problem we've had in developing our car parks. And what we would hopefully see is more open space in one of our most needy areas in the corner of Bree Street and Hope Street. So I'm fairly supportive, and I hope that we see what comes out of this agreement in the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers? Did you have a request? Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Oh, look, I'm interested in the fact that this has been drawn out in point 2 regarding the section 173. I would have thought number 1 covers that, because that's the kind of thing officers provide us, but I'm happy for it to be made more explicit. I just wanted to stand and speak about this, because this is an opportunity where we can actually get some open space in one of the highest needs, which has already been said, but we've now gone through a consultation to expend our open space funds, and it isn't going to be easy to get that open space, but this is really an opportunity which we can seize, or potentially seize, and get a win-win for that community that needs open space, and a way of also accommodating the parking needs of that area. I disagree with Councillor Farnley's remarks around the need for car parking in this area. I go through these spaces all the time, and there are car parks all the time there, and but that's a point of difference between us. And so I don't think that we need to get more car parking, but I do agree we need to continue to provide the car parks that are already there for the extra residents coming in, but also for all the other activity that happens in the area. So this is about getting something done in a timely fashion. It's about using our funds that were already created, but it's also a way of doing this which is going to be a win-win for just about everyone involved. So I'm quite keen to see what comes out of this recommendation.
Councillor Abood?
Yes, I'd like to request that we split it into 3, 1, 2 and 3, and vote on each point separately,
I'm
please.
happy to do that. So before I do that, are there any other speakers? Okay, we will vote on them on 3 separate points. Okay, just stand if a councillor requests to do so. So we're going to vote on point 1, councillors. Okay, I'll ask to put point 1 to the vote. All those in favour of point 1? Carried unanimously. Okay, we're moving on point 2. All those councillors who are in favour of point 2, please raise your hand. Against? Declare that carried.
I have a division on that.
Yes, you can have a division on that. Okay, so those councillors who voted in favour of point 2, would you raise your hand again, please? That's Yildiz, Tapanos, Farnley, Kavanagh, Davidson, Bolton. And against? Riley, Martin, Abood.
You're going to need some more time.
Sorry.
To record them,
Yep.
because it's a mixture. People can start.
No worries.
Councillor Bolton's in.
For sure. Okay, so just to clarify that, we've got in favour we had Yildiz, Tapanos, Farnley, Kavanagh, Davidson, Bolton. Against? Riley, Martin, Abood, Dorney. Thank you. Okay. And point 3, all those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Councillors, that concludes the presentation of officer reports. Just before we move on to notices of motions, I've just been informed that good news for Moreland, that Brunswick's own Isis Holt has just taken home gold at the Commonwealth Games in the T35 100 metre sprint at the age of 16. I believe the T35 is for athletes who suffer from cerebral palsy, and at the age of 16 she's taken home a gold medal. So congratulations. Good. We move on now to notices of motion. Councillors, I ask that you start by stating your motion and then provide a brief background. Actually, we won't read the motions because unless they're different to what's been printed on the agenda. So if they're as listed on the agenda, we'll assume that you've read them. And yours is first, Councillor Yildiz. So CityLink, we've got nomination 818, CityLink, Vic Roads and Transurban, and it's been put forward by Councillor Yildiz. And does Councillor Yildiz have a seconder to his notice of motion? Councillor O'Farnley. Okay, Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to your motion now?
Oh, look, I think, councillors, I spoke about this at the last council meeting, so I don't want to waste anyone's time anymore. Not much has changed since my last arguments were put forward, so I'd hope that councillors support this motion by, I guess, acknowledging that there are issues around that precinct of the freeway, or that section of the freeway, and I don't think that's been handled well, and the residents have been, unfortunately, have been the ones that have lost hundreds of dollars, and I think it's about time that the state government acknowledges that this hasn't been handled well, and there needs to be some form of compensation paid for those people who weren't able to get off the freeway at certain times of the day. And even now, there are still people that are messaging me saying that they're finding it extremely frustrating having to miss that turn off that is not well lit or is not clear.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor O'Farnley, would you like to speak to it? Okay. Is there any further debate on this notice of motion? Being no further yes, Councillor.
I just wanted to highlight in here that it is definitely a state government issue, this one, and this is what happens when you privatise our roads. So I would really like to highlight those two items.
Okay, so yeah, would you like? Sorry, I've just got a statement from a comment from the CEO.
Just a quick point through the Mayor. The notice of motion was submitted 4 weeks ago, and it notes in the past 6 weeks. It might be worth considering whether you change that to 10 weeks to account for the fact that 4 more weeks have passed. So it's just a point.
Absolutely. So that motion was actually
6 to 10.
That's right, because that motion was written for the last council meeting, but we had issues in getting it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all good.
Very good pick up, Chief Executive Officer. Yes. Oh, well done.
That's why she gets paid big bucks.
To be commended. Yeah. Okay, all right. So is there any further discussion on the notice of motion? If there's none, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Abstaining? Yeah. You're right. Okay, I'll declare that lost. All right. Landscape bonds, Councillor Abood. Is it the same? Is it the motion that's been printed in the agenda?
No, it's not.
No, it's not. So read it because it varies from what's in the agenda. I'll ask you to read it.
Okay. And so, very good. So the changed resolution reads that Council 1 continues to work through the short-term actions of the Urban Forest Strategy as adopted, prioritising actions 2.4, items 1 through to 6, to be implemented within the short-term timeframes with a view to establishing tree and landscape bonds. And point 2 calls for a report outlining progress regarding the establishment of tree and landscape bonds by November 2018.
Okay, that's the motion. Would have a seconder? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Councillor. So this actually went through Stonington Council and was brought to my attention, and not everything that I do is an original, but sometimes people have good ideas and they're worth copying. But when I delved into the detail of this, I realised with joy that we have already established a couple of things, one being the local laws, which is endeavouring to establish a significant tree register, and also the great body of work which was undertaken and finalised not long after I was elected to council, which is known as the Urban Forest Strategy. There are lots of different actions inside the Urban Forest Strategy, but the ones that related most closely to the tree bonds also endeavoured to establish what's known as a landscape bond. So what I really need to do is thank Grant Thorne, who's on holidays, but I'm sure he's watching the meeting, because we're all sick like that, for all of his work, and his staff as well for their work, to help in helping me to prepare this notice of motion, just to really solidify the detail around this stuff and how important it is that we get these trees protected and get this strategy backed up and all of this stuff really locked in as soon as we can. It's been brought to my attention also that short term is between 1 and 3 years. So I'm hoping that we're aiming much earlier down the scale towards 1, which is why I've called for the report, because I hope that this will happen quickly.
Thank you. The seconder was Councillor Bolton. Would you like to speak to Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to say a couple of things. One, I would like to point out, because people might not be aware, that the benefit of tree bonds and landscape bonds is that a developer can just knock down really significant trees, and the fine for knocking down trees, destroying trees, is very minimal. Whereas I think what the City of Stonington is doing, it's a significant bond that they pay, which they get refunded to the developer if they preserve those significant trees. And I think it's a really interesting idea that they're planning to do. I think they're starting it starts next year. And certainly I think we need to investigate this. I gather there's some work to be done by council officers to outline exactly what a landscape bond would look like. But certainly I think this is a direction we need to go in, because we, as fast as we plant trees on the streets to guard against the urban heat island effect, they're being ripped out of suburban backyards for development.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further discussion on this? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We next have a notice of motion 1112, correspondence to the Australian Leisure and Hospitality Group. Yeah, just let me get it out first. Hospitality Group and Woolworths Limited. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. It's moved by Councillor Tapanos as it appears in the agenda, I assume, and seconded by Councillor Abood and Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Well, this is a request for information, really, from Woolworths and the Australian Leisure and Hospitality Group, who run many pokie venues, particularly in Moreland. And it's really, it's arisen because of a question in the House of Parliament by Andrew Wilkie MP about the conduct of some of the employees and some of the manuals and instructions to some of the employees in these pokie venues. So I guess what I'm seeking here is to write to them and ask them the question of, did some of this conduct where they instructed their staff to monitor patrons and monitor their behaviour and the way they were playing pokies and trying to keep them there as long as possible, was that behaviour that occurred in our Moreland venues? I think this would be some critical information for me and for this council, so we know exactly what is happening in some of our venues with pokie machines. It would help us understand the tactics by the gambling industry, and it would help us develop policies to address some of the problems and harms that come from problem gambling. So I think this correspondence, I would be really interested in hearing the response from Woolworths the people who bring you pokie machines.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos and Councillor Abboud.
Yeah, this is another one of the notices of motion that I tried to copy from another council, but Councillor Tapanos beat me to the punch because he did. And so with that in mind, I need to outline from my perspective the importance of knowing this information. And I read a really interesting article today about the people who are actually being affected by some of this dishonest behaviour, I guess you could call it, regarding the way pokies operate in the city and beyond. And I say beyond because the notice of motion came from Hume. And I'd like to pay credit to Councillor Joseph Harwell of Hume, who has earned himself a reputation for working really hard as one of the representatives to the Alliance for Gambling Reform, which is 12 partner councils involved, and Moreland is one of them, which is why we have an entitlement to, put this position forward. Apart from the fact that we do need to support the residents of the city who are losing close to $20 million a year, which is an absolutely unthinkable amount of money. But what's connected to that, and this is in some of the background, which I did have a hand in creating, is that gambling doesn't only rob people of their money, and gambling addictions and the way these pokies operate don't just rob people of their money, but they rob people of their self-esteem and their confidence, and losing money through gambling has become responsible for domestic violence. It's become responsible for the kinds of family problems that are very hard to imagine, and it is absolutely the responsibility of the council, and I'm glad that there are 12 councils that have taken this on board, to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to find out what the operators of these pokie machines are doing in the city. I would suggest that the damage that that particular establishment is doing with pokies is only the tip of the iceberg of the damage that it's doing to community, but that's my personal belief.
Thank you, Councillor Abboud. Is there any other discussion on this item? Being no further discussion, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Yes, can we record that as unanimous? Thank you. Okay, we've got notice of motion 1218, D division in the former Pentridge site. This is the notice of motion from me, and it varies from what was written in the agenda, so I'll read it. The council resolves that 1, as a registered state significant heritage asset over which the state government has full jurisdiction for safeguarding, council lobby the planning minister, the Honourable Richard Wynne, to achieve the outcome of the state government purchasing D division of the former Pentridge prison and then implementing the legal covenant requiring a properly administered and curated museum. 2, council seeks a meeting with the Minister for Planning that includes representatives of the Pentridge Community Action Group and the Coburg Historical Society to enhance council's advocacy, and in order that they can outline directly their wishes for this site as a properly curated museum, which brings to historical events and key features, in brackets, such as the panopticons and Ronald Bull mural, end of brackets, at Pentridge, for the purpose of cultural and educational tourism. And so I'm moving that, and I was going to see Councillor Bolton is seconding, and I'll just briefly speak to it. We had a meeting with a number of weeks ago with a number of councillors and the representative of the Pentridge Community Action Group, and I know we've had motions like this in the past, but it's important that this D division is out there. The state government have had heritage controls on the site. In other words, they've been the responsible authority as far as heritage aspects go, and we're asking them. We realise that the covenant that is in place, a legally binding covenant requiring that there be a museum, has not commenced and is unlikely to commence. And so we're saying to the state government, if that's not going to be enforced, and it doesn't appear as though it is, please buy the site and enforce it. But the motion is even more than that. It's saying we see Pentridge as a part of an area that could be that is is of historical significance and is not being respected in that way, and can form, a whole part of the north of a heritage and cultural trail. So that's the whole idea of the motion. Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I think this is an important motion. I think when the prison was closed and sold off, I gather there was never any entertainment about cultural and educational tourism, i.e. preservation of part of the prison to make it a sort of a beacon for people to visit. There's certainly other historic places like the old Fremantle prison, the Abbotsford Convent, which are beacons. Then you can see things like the Living Museum of the West, which is quite a beacon for visitors to the Footscray area, but nothing like that's really ever been entertained in Pentridge. The developer was meant to create a museum, and they're under legal obligation to create a museum 10 years ago on this site, in D Division in fact, but this has never ever been enforced by any of the authorities, by the Heritage Victoria or any other body. But also it has been pointed out to me that sometimes when groups that are such as developers that might not have an interest in a properly curated museum, sometimes what you end up is some little organisation with just a few exhibits, but it's not really a place that really brings to life and really preserves that history. And so really what's needed, if we're really serious about preserving the history, which includes a massive Aboriginal mural by Aboriginal artist Ronald Bull on the wall of F Division, and these panopticons, which are unique in the world, a particular prison formation, we need really the state government to step in and create a properly curated museum, and that would be a massive boost for Moreland in terms of visitors, school groups and all sorts of groups in terms of bringing our history to life in Moreland. So I think there has been a lack of vision in not really coming up with something like this much earlier. So anyway, I think hopefully we'll be successful with this, and it's a good idea that we're involving these community groups.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any further discussion on this? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, could I have a motion for an extension of time, please, for half an hour? Moved by Councillor Tapanos, seconded by Councillor Abood. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to our final notice of motion. Notice of motion 1318, Moomba Park Primary Open Space. Councillor Farnley is the mover.
Yes, thank you. The notice of motion is very similar. It's just got a couple of extra words in there to add the school president.
That's fine then, I think.
And the school president.
Okay.
School council president.
School council president.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay, school council.
It's almost the same thing.
Yeah, it's both ways.
Okay. Get that one wrong. Do I need a seconder before I speak?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yes, Councillor Abood.
Thank you for seconding, Councillor Abood. Look, this is a very straightforward motion. I'm just asking the Chief Executive Officer and the Council to write a letter to the Principal and the School President of Moomba Park Primary in Fawkner. They've got this wonderful oval and lots of this beautiful open space as part of their school. It was open to the community for decades. In fact, they played cricket there over the summer. Not this summer, the summer before. But look, unfortunately, the gates have gone up. So these processes start with just engaging the principal, seeing if they're open to opening up on the weekends again to the residents. If they are open, then we can go down a path of looking at what that partnership would look like.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Farnley. Councillor Abood?
Nothing to add.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this item? Being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes notices of motion. We have a couple of general business items for members of the gallery and for those live streaming. An item of general business relates to business that calls for a presentation of a report to a future council meeting. General business business items do not appear in the council agenda, but these items will be minuted. I'll now ask each councillor in turn to speak to the general business item, and I'll ask for a mover or a seconder. The first general business item is from Councillor Abood, and the title is Upfield Shared Path, Concerns Regarding Missing Link Following Camp Road Separation. And as I said, the mover of the item is Councillor Abood. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bolton and Councillor Abood, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just very briefly, this had already been through, and it's just that we sent a letter to 19 recipients, and there are, I was informed, and I agree, that there are 4 people, thank you, John and Mark, that there are 4 people that did need to receive this letter who weren't on the original list. So those people have been outlined. So Mr. Peter Khalil, Maria Van Bakenu, Lisa Lanthorne and Jane Garrett.
Thank you. Self-explanatory. Good.
Yeah.
Do you have a seconder? Don't need to speak to your seconder? No. All right. Any other speakers? Don't put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. The next general business item is from Councillor Yildiz, City Oval Gates. And as I said, the move of the general business item is Councillor Yildiz. Do I have a seconder? I'm happy to. Yeah, okay. Councillor Farnley. Okay. Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak to that?
So we had a meeting with the chairman and also the GM of the Coburg Footy Club. It has been a major issue for them from Friday evening right through till the match day, and even afterwards, to be able to leave things overnight at the club. So what the club have asked us to do is to still allow visitors to use the grounds during that time, but not allow the large gates on the western side of the ground to be open just during that period of time from Friday evening, 6 p.m, right through to around about probably 4 or 5 p.m. on the Sunday. Reason being is because there are games played on the Sunday as well. West Coburg also use that ground. So there'll be still a gate open for people who use it. The gate will just be a normal gate at 1.2 metres in width. So I think this is a good. They're not playing every weekend. It's only when there's matches on. They've got large marquees, barbecues. They're bringing in large umbrellas. It just makes sense that we've got a VFL club in our municipality, which really is without a doubt the jewel in VFL clubs, Aussie rules here in Moreland. And West Coburg is another club that uses the facility for 7 games during the year. And my discussions with them has also confirmed that they would love this to happen. Initially, I was thinking maybe close the gates entirely and don't allow anyone to use the facility outside those hours, but some of the councillors have voiced their concerns regarding that, and I do know that both clubs would be happy with having one gate if necessary. So I really do encourage you, for the sake of the clubs waking up at 4 a.m. on match day to get all that stuff in and then have to spend hours getting it out, and with the fear of now hopefully they'll be able to do that on a Friday night and not have the fear that anyone's going to take the stuff and walk away.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Farnley? Okay. Do you want to speak against? Or?
No.
No. Okay. Yep.
I just wanted to stand up and commend Councillor Yildiz on putting this forward. I think it's a very good general business item.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll just make it just a point that it is to come back in a report at the next council meeting. So it's calling for the report at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't say the next council meeting.
Oh, right. Okay. The director indicated that he would be able to have this by the next council meeting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. No worries. Fair enough. Okay. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes our general business items, and as there's no urgent business, I'd like to move into confidential section. So could I have a motion for council meeting to be closed to the public in accordance with section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989. Moved by Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Martin. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. I now declare the council meeting closed to the public. I'd like to thank the gallery attendees and also thank those watching live on live streaming for your interest in council matters, and respectfully request that you